All right. Hey, people. Today is March 28th, 2025. I'm Chris Lucas. This is my show, The Protestant View. Today I'm going to talk about Daniel, and it's a bit of a random live stream. I just kind of decided to do one because I haven't done one for a while. Um, and basically, I've been working 70 hours a week. Everything I do is kind of a surprise to me when I plan on doing a show because I don't even know if I'm going to do a show anymore. I'm trying to work hard on finishing up a couple of books. I'm working on 3 books right now. I'm really trying to finish this Daniel 9 book. Um, but it's kind of been a struggle because once I get to the middle of it, um, basically, sorry, just got a little distracted because I realized I have heard of a sandwich all over my phone. But anyway, it's when you get to the middle of this book, because it's starting to get very technical. If I work 70 hours a week and I'm thinking about all this other stuff, when I sit down and read my book again, I don't remember the last thing I was talking about. So that's kind of why it's taken me so long. Or else it's like if I had just like a regular job where I work 40 hours a week, I'd easily have this done by now. Um, but anyway, uh, part of the thing about this whole book is it's kind of frustrating me that I'm even having to write it in the first place. Oh, by the way, if anyone is watching, if you want to join the show, feel free to click that link and join. In fact, let me get that banner going. Sorry, I really did not plan on doing this show, so um, actually, the link's not in the description, but you can see what link I'm talking about. Anyway, so the only pushback I have gotten that's even any decent pushback to saying that Daniel 9:27 was already fulfilled by Jesus is someone that is, like I had a couple of people that are just adamantly pointing to the decree of Cyrus, saying that has to be the decree. Because all the other arguments, I feel like I have just completely destroyed. And I feel like the people who I have debated and argued with know I have destroyed their arguments. You cannot start this decree from Artaxerxes in 445 or 444, whatever date they want to argue for. It's just not going to work because the Jews never used a calendar that had 360 days and they can't come up with no proof. And when people start arguing with me, like, well, you don't know what calendar they use. Well, if you don't know what calendar they use, you need to go figure it out before you start teaching people about prophecy. Okay. You come up with a good proof. I only see one proof in the whole Bible, right? And we know the Jews, you can just go on a random website, like, shoot, like if you go on to Shabbat.org, right? It's a Jewish website. What calendar are they using? They're using a lunar solar calendar. So when I'm thinking about this prophecy, why would I use any other calendar but the calendar I see that looks like the standard calendar that all Jews are using? Now, if you guys want to keep it on insisting that no, we don't know what calendar, Chris, it could be a 360-day calendar. Well, then stop teaching prophecy. You go figure it out and you go come back to us and you show us, right? Like don't be like, oh, I know how this is all fulfilled and this all makes sense. Really, how did you figure it out? How did you figure out that the 490 years actually fulfill Jesus, right? Because you don't even know how the calendar works, so you don't even know how to count a year. You don't even know what a year is, but yet you're telling us that you're the expert, that you know Daniel's 70-week prophecy. And it's just so frustrating to me because I've heard this. I'm 50 years old. I know people tell me I don't look it, but I've been around this earth for 50 years, right? I grew up in the height of dispensationalism. I grew up in a ghetto, so it's not like I even had, like all these educated people around me, right? It's just pretty much whatever is the standard stuff that is thrown on TV, like the 700 Club, which is basically dispensationalism, right? So I'm a little kid growing up with my grandma watching 700 Club, and then maybe like a radio program. And what are they teaching? Dispensationalism, right? Daniel's 70th week is the future. So that's all I've heard, right? So it's not like I haven't been like I wasn't open to the view, because when you're hearing it so much, you're thinking that must be the view, because why is this everywhere if it's not the correct view? And when I start to really study it and find out, I start to find out that it feels like all these seminary professors, Bible teachers, prophecy teachers, book authors, movies, everyone's lying to me. That's what I find, and they're lying to you. And to me, they're knowingly lying, because once you start studying this stuff, how did you ever come to the conclusion that this prophecy is about an antichrist? And so anyone who's very new to this, I guess I could open up let's see if I can find a file where I have maybe the 70 weeks written out or something. I said I didn't really plan this show too well in advance. I might have like a... Okay, yeah, here we go. I think I got like... So we'll just do this simple little thing. All right. This is the simplest way for that I would think anyone would do the prophecy, right? Because in the book of Daniel, in Daniel 9, verse 25. Well, let's just go with verse 24, where it says 77s have been decreed for your people, right? So that's telling you 77s. Now, the actual word sevens there in Hebrew is Shavua, and that typically means a 7-year period of time. When it means like 7 days, it will say a week of days, a Shavua of days, like it does in Daniel chapter 10, verse 3, where it says Daniel was fasting for 3 Shavua, 3 sevens of days, right? Or that's a lot of Bible translations translate that as weeks, right? So that's when you hear 70 weeks of Daniel, they're actually talking about the Hebrew. That word weeks there is the word shavua in Hebrew, or shavuim, and that I am sound on there, im, that lets you know that Hebrew word is plural. So shavu im is the plural part, right? So that means weeks. So now 70 weeks, but the weeks in Hebrew, like I said, it's a 7-year period of time. So 70 times 7 is 490 years. So now all you have to do is find all these decree dates, right? And you can look this up on any biblical archaeology site. I go to biblearchaeology.com, or maybe it's .org. I can't remember. I go on their website, and then they got the some of the best archaeology I know of. I just go on there and find these decree dates. Oh, Cyrus 538 BC. Now, I will say, because some will argue that the Jews might have used either a spring to spring or a fall to fall calendar, so you might see things be 1 year off, but that's the most this can be off of, is 1 year, right? But so you come up to this, and if you add 490 years to any of these dates, okay, I add 490 years to 538. Well, 48 BC. Was Jesus born in 48 BC? Because it says, you're going to see the Messiah after 483 years, after 7 and 62 weeks. That's 483 years altogether. That's when Messiah is supposed to appear. Which most people think that's right when he gets baptized. So Because there was no proclamation. No one was saying, oh, the Messiah is here, No one was saying that until after he got baptized. That's when everyone starts asking and pointing and asking Jesus everything, all right? So that's why we say Messiah appears, okay? Well, we know 48 BC, Messiah wasn't here. So now we add 490 years to 520 BC. We see 30 BC, no Messiah. We can add 490 years to 457 BC and we get 34 AD, right? Oh, wait a minute. If I add, okay, so that might be a date because, that final 7 years, we do see Messiah from 27 AD to 34 AD. Okay, let's keep this one. This one looks like something worth checking out. And now we got this other one, Artaxerxes, 20th year, 444 BC. You add 490 years, you get 4780. Oops, I didn't mean to make that one. So you get 4780. Or if you just add 483 years, like all the futurists like to do, you get 4080. Messiah was already crucified by then, so well, just throw that one out, right? And if you notice, I got this little math at the end here because a lot of them go, oh, no, Chris. What you're supposed to do is, it's a prophetic year. And you add 360 days and you take 483 times 360, because we know this is all over the Bible, right? And so now you get 173,880, and you divide it by 365.25, and you get 476 years. Now, Chris, now you add the 476 years to the 444 or 445 BC date. Now you get 3380, and now we see Messiah. And see, now our prophecy works. But look at what you had to do. See, that when you start to have to do all this extra stuff that you don't see in the Bible, and you can't defend, and I go, well, okay, can you just simply show me where that's at in the Old Testament? You go, I can't. I don't know how. Okay, see, do you understand? Like, I don't have to do that with any of this other stuff, but once you start having so many times where it's like, well, can you show me? And it's like, well, I don't know, and it's like, okay, maybe that's not a good way of doing it. And maybe if this is a prophecy that's supposed to be about the Messiah, maybe this is one thing that gives us a reason to why the Jews don't have an excuse to reject their Messiah, because it was prophesied. And we can clearly see that the prophecy hit the date it was supposed to hit. We can clearly see the Bible's a prophetic book and that Daniel's a true prophet. But why do you want to, like, I don't even understand and I got to say, what possesses these people to want to do any of this crazy stuff to make these other dates hit? And today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on this Cyrus one, right? Because this is the one I got all the pushback. Because what they want to do is they want to divide the first 49 years, the 7 weeks. Then they're going to say that was from Cyrus's decree, and then it ends 49 years later. And then they want to say the 434 years starts at another point and it ends right at the crucifixion. And at least most of them say it ends at the crucifixion. I talked to one guy yesterday, Dr. George Antonios, but it wasn't the best conversation because I was kind of busy, and so I couldn't like be at my computer and follow him real closely what he was saying. But it sounded to me like he was saying that he believed the 62 weeks ends at his birth, which doesn't make sense to me. So I don't quite get that, and I need to have some more clarification on that one, if that's what he was actually saying. But most of them, if they use Cyrus's decree, they'll say, okay, from 538 to about, what is it? Trying to do this math in my head, 487 BC, something like that. Or is it 489 BC? That's like a 49-year period of time. And then they say, and then the 434 years starts up later. But I want to show you something. I King James. Oops. I didn't mean to close out all those. So let's just, I'm just going to go to the King James 1611. Because I know there's so many people are just so hung up on that, using the King James only. And I don't think it's going to hurt much right here. So, oh boy, I need to see it regular wise. That's not going to work. Daniel 9 KJV. So just so people have some idea of what I'm saying. So it says 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city. And by the way, anyone that's watching, if you want to join and ask questions or comment, feel free to join. But anyway, it says 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and thy holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, and to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness and self-division and the prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. So right down here is where I'm going to get into the issue, because they're going to try to divide these 70 weeks up into 3 different parts. Know therefore and understand from the going forth the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem to Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks. So that's your first 49 years, right? And 62 weeks, the street will be built again, the wall even in the troublous times. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not from himself. So the problem right here, right off the bat, is we can see a beginning point to start the first 7 weeks, right? Because it says it shall be 7 weeks, right? So we can find a starting point. Okay, you want to try to do that. We know that's from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem to Messiah the Prince. But what about the 62 weeks? Where does that start at? Because I just see it shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. So yeah, those together, that's 69 weeks altogether. And then verse 26 says, and after the 62 weeks, the 62 weeks. So this is 69 weeks altogether, right? And I don't see, the problem is those people that want to say it's Cyrus's decree and they want to stop it and then start it somewhere else. Where do you start it at? What's the event? I know the first event. Here's the first event, the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem. To restore and build. Keep those 2 things in mind, which Cyrus did not do. But they want to claim it off of it, and I'll get to that in a moment. But they want to claim that Cyrus did both of these things. But, in 489 BC, what did we see? We still see Jerusalem's, and it has not been restored at all. So what's going on there, right? Because I thought he gave the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. But now, okay, if you want to say that was just the first 7 weeks, where does it start again? So see, there's the problem. We don't see a starting point. Because what I need to find is we're not gonna start at the end of it, at the end of the 62. No. What we need to do is we need to know it was actually 62. It could have been more, and this could be a failed prophecy. That's why we need to know the beginning of the 62. We don't just count backwards from this. We need a starting point, so we know from counting backwards, because you could go, well, we're counting backwards, Chris, from 33 AD, and we're landing wherever they want to land at, right? And they go, and there's where the 434 starts, because we're counting backwards. The problem is, how does anyone know it's not even further back than that? And it didn't even take more time than that. So what was the event? That way we can count from that to the end of this, right? Because you're saying 33 AD. So what's the event? And not the event. Like, you're not going to make up an event and like go look back through history. Oh, I looked 434 years ago. Okay, Chris, it was this event right here. No, 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 no. First, tell me the event we're looking for in this prophecy before we start reading history books. You look at this. What does the prophecy say that event is? Oh, can't find it, can you? There is no event. So why did you even bother doing that nonsense? See, my whole thing is I have 490 years. No one has to ask all these questions that I'm having to ask, right? I have to ask these questions for these people who have to do this prophecy any other way. And here I am. I have a very easy way of doing it. Add 490 years to one of the 4 decree dates. Oh, this one in 457 looks like it matches up the best. Let's see if we can match up everything else with the prophecy. And if I get down to the end here, and it's talking about the last week, right? And he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. And also keep in mind, it says, and after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off. Okay, did Messiah get crucified? If we add 483 years to 457 BC, which brings us to 27 AD, do we see Messiah getting crucified after 27 AD? Almost everyone, even if you believe the Catholic 33 AD crucifixion date, you would have to say, yes, we see Messiah getting kind of. So far, when I'm doing it this way, it looks like it's adding up, right? So now let's go read verse 27. Does it still add up? And for 1 week, and he shall confirm a covenant with many. It's actually not for 1 week, because it makes it sound like he's only confirming a covenant for 1 week, or he's confirming the covenant for a whole week. The Hebrew, to me, and maybe I'm wrong, and I'm hoping that maybe I get a friend to stop by. I gave him kind of short notice. I'm doing a show, a couple of friends, short notice. And sorry about that. But when I'm looking at this Hebrew, it just looks like he shall confirm a covenant with many, comma, 1 week. So it's not saying it's going to be for 1 week. It's just saying 1 week. And we know there's 1 week left in this prophecy. So that's all it's to me when I'm reading the Hebrew. And like I said, I'm kind of new to it, and I double check it with AI, and I try to double check it with some friends I know. That's what it comes across to me as. And it's like he shall confirm a covenant with many 1 week. So it's just telling you there's 1 week left in the prophecy, or the 1 week left in the prophecy, he's going to confirm a covenant with many. And in the midst of that week, and in the Hebrew, it's actually not midst, it's middle, right? It's like almost the exact middle of the week. He shall cause sacrifice and oblation to cease, or sacrifice and offering to cease, right? So if now I think Jesus's ministry started in 27 AD. I think there's plenty of proof for it. And if you go 3.5 years from 27 AD to 31 AD, I believe it's 31 AD. There's your 3 years into it, right? 3.5 years, almost exactly, because I believe there's a fall to fall counting from Tishri on the Jewish calendar. That would be like, I know some people are going to argue that's not the new year, because the month of Passover is actually the first month of the year, but they got a civil and a religious calendar. And I believe this is counting according to the civil calendar, just because when they count these sabbatical cycles, which is like a 7-year period, right? A 7-year counting. They always start in the fall, from what I'm seeing in the Bible. So that's why I'm starting this count from the fall. And because these sabbatical cycles, when it came to the month of Tishri, that's also when the debts would be forgiven and everything like that. And considering this is a prophecy about the Messiah making an end for sin, forgiving debt, because that was the biggest accomplishment he made, right? Was to bring in everlasting righteousness. So we could have atonement for sins, despite whatever model of atonement you might have. That was the biggest thing, so he could make atonement. So anyway, so that's why I think it's on that the fall to fall cycle, right? Because that's when those debts were usually released, from my understanding. Someone can go correct me if I'm wrong. Because I like that to be corrected before I do a book if someone's got some real pushback to it. So that's why I'm starting it that way. That's why I even came up with the 457 BC date. And that's why and so now when I go by that, and I'm basing all the records off of that kind of counting, which is what a lot of archaeologists, biblical archaeologists, look like they do. It brings me to 27 AD. So 27 AD, I believe that's right around when Jesus gets baptized. 3.5 years later, 31 AD, and that's when he gets crucified. And so I'm like, oh, that this all adds up, right? But even if you want to say, oh no, I insist it's got to be 3380. Well, this is the only that reckoning from that decree date is the only date I see, and it keeps it nice and simple. Let's just not fight over the 3180 for now, 3080, 3380. Just just this simple process of doing this. I have all this making sense within that timeline, within that frame of 490 years, without having to go, oh, this we're using this calendar. Hey, Liam, stop. So I'm able to do this whole prophecy without going, oh, we don't know, they could have been using a 360-day calendar. Okay, well, if you think it's so, go prove it. Oh, I can't, I don't know where it's at in the Old Testament. Oh, so you're just saying it, right? See, I'm not having to do that, because it's real easy. You just go to Genesis 1, and plus you just go on any random Jewish website, and almost every single one of them are keeping a lunar solar calendar, where it's got 354 days in a regular year and about 384 days in a leap year. Now, every once in a while, give or take a day, it might be a day off. But for the most part, 354 days in a regular year, 354 days in a regular year, 384 days in a leap year. And over a 19-year cycle, it's going to have 7 leap years in it. And when you compare that to a 19-year Gregorian calendar, it's only off by an hour. So there's no reason to overcomplicate things and go, well, Jewish time would make a year a lot shorter or a lot longer. You don't have to do that. No, if you want to just basically do the math in your head, you can just do it Gregorian style. And then when you want to get into more details, you can just look at the Jewish calendar and get into more details and more specifics and nuances. But so I don't have these problems. And so I don't know why someone wants to insist on overcomplicating it. And to me, they're the ones that are trying to come off like, oh, you're the super expert because you know of some calendar that we can't figure out in the Bible. And when I go on Jewish websites, none of them are using your calendar, but you're using this specific calendar. So that way you can have your prophecy about an Antichrist, because they want to turn this into a prophecy about the Antichrist. And I'm going to go into more of that because the Hebrew doesn't allow it. And I was talking to Dr. Antonio, George Antonio, on his show yesterday, which was March 27th. If someone wants to go watch it, just go watch about the final hour and a half of it. That's when I joined the show. And I'll admit, I didn't know some of the Hebrew particulars as well as I did. So that's kind of why I'm doing this show, to kind of clarify some things. Because when I'm looking up certain words, so now I'm going to go into the interlinear of this. Interlinear Daniel. because I'm going to go into the interlinear of this, because what I initially said was the Hebrew tells you that this has to be about Jesus. So the Jewish calendar, the biblical calendar, demands that this has to be about Jesus, as I just showed, right? So now, when we look at the Hebrew, it's going to tell you that this he in Daniel 9:27 has to be about Jesus. There's no other choice. So now, when I'm looking at this, we're going to go to verse 25. And it says, therefore know and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks. Now, right here, we got Messiah Nagid, right? So the thing I was a little confused about was it says a leader, ruler, prince, noble, commander. And it says the term Nagid, and I'm getting this right from Strong's Concordance here. I'll blow it up more so people can see what I'm reading. The term Nagid is used in the Hebrew Bible to denote a leader or a ruler, often with a connotation of divinely appointed authority. So I'm just was using Strong's, right? And then, Dr. George did point out that in, I think it's Job 29, some people are called Nagids. And I guess the argument was that they're not divinely appointed. So therefore, Nagid doesn't always mean it. So that's where I was wrong. So if anyone saw that show, I want to clarify. That's might be where I'm wrong. I still have to kind of look into that more and understand that. But it says in ancient Israel, leadership was often seen as of divine mandate. The Nagid was expected to lead with wisdom, justice, and adherence to God's laws. So it's just kind of the fact that I see the word Nagid, and it usually describes or denotes a leader with a divinely appointed authority. That's why I was sort of like, why would we just jump to thinking that this Nagid in verse 25 is talking about an antichrist, especially when, this Nagid, so it's not in verse 25, it's going to be in verse 26 that they say Nagid is referring to the antichrist. See, we see it says Messiah Prince. Now in Hebrew it's just Messiah Prince, but Messiah the Prince when it's I can't remember what it's called when you got those nouns that are close together. Sorry, I'm kind of like spacing on all the grammar terminology. So now we're going to get down to here in their verse about the Antichrist, right? And after the weeks 60 and 2 shall be cut off Messiah. So same word we saw up in verse 25, but not for himself. And the city and the sanctuary shall destroy the people of the prince. So right here we see Am, which is the people, and Nagid again. Okay, so how many times, what Nagid did we see? The only Nagid we see in this entire chapter is Messiah Nagid. And now the people of the prince of, so to me it sounds like this is the Jews. And this particular Hebrew word, Am, because I want to clarify what I said on his show because I didn't have any text in front of me. I couldn't, it's real hard for me to think and have a conversation about all these like grammar arguments, right? But the people right here has to be an ethnicity of this prince. And so earlier when we see Am brought up, we see it in this verse 24. 70 weeks are determined for your people. See right here, we see Am again. This Am, when it's used, now you have the words Goy and you have the words Am. Now, a lot of people probably know a little bit of Hebrew and know what Goy means. It means nations, right? And it's not like a particular ethnicity. Like, let me explain it like this. Like, um, it would be proper for me to say something like, "Oh, there are the Philistines, and one of their is going to fight David." Okay, that's a proper use. I wouldn't say one of their goy, because it's actually like the Philistines are actually like a cultural ethnicity of people, right? And they're tied together, they're probably tied together by like a religion and everything like that. So that's why it would be proper to use am there. I would not use the word goy there, right? Now, if I was to refer to like American, I like America, I could say, okay, America is a goy, but if I go um I cannot say an American is an am, right? Or an I guess might be the proper way of saying it. I cannot say an American is an because would denote a specific ethnicity. Americans are made up of many right? They're a goy that's made up of many if I'm understanding all this terminology correctly. So it has to be an ethnicity. So that's what I was kind of getting a little confused, because I know when guy says, my people, he goes my right? My am, my he never says my goy. He does use this one reference, but he goes, and I will make, like, way earlier in the Bible, I can't remember what Old Testament passage it is, but when you look at the Hebrew, he goes, and I will make them a holy goy, or out of them I will make them a holy goy, a holy nation. But see, a nation is like without ethnicity, right? But he's actually adding the words holy, right? But all the other times God refers to him, he goes, my people, he says my he wouldn't say my goy, because they are a specific ethnicity with religious and cultural unity. So the problem comes when the only Nagid we see in here mentioned is the Nagid, Messiah Nagid, in verse 25. So when we go down to verse 26, it says, yeah, and after the week 62 shall be cut off Messiah, but not for himself, and the city and the sanctuary shall destroy the people. This is a little awkward. It's more like the people will destroy. Um, in English, you would say like the people will destroy the city and the sanctuary. Um, I think that's how the King James has it rendered. Um, but the important part is the people, the of the prince. So this would be an ethnicity, and if I click it, oops. Let me click this right up here. So it says a people, a tribe, troops, a flock, but it's more like a people as like an ethnicity. They kind of went a little too generic here. It's more like kinfolk, a tribe, a flock. That would be a better use of it. And if you look down here, like when it's translated into Greek, ethnos, right? Ethnicity. Okay. So if you're to take the same Hebrew word and translate it to Greek, you're going to have the word ethnos. Okay. So, and right here, it's even telling you in Strong's Concordance, the Hebrew word primarily refers to a group of people, often used to denote a nation or a collective body of individuals with a common identity. So now, if you're going to keep insisting that this is the Antichrist, this Nagid, you're really fighting a couple of things, because normally it's a divinely appointed leader. Now you can make the argument it's not always, but there's many cases where it is. Like when it's Saul, he's made into a Nagid, right? So so this prince of these people have to be the same ethnicity. Now, it makes perfect sense when you're reading the way I'm reading this, which is 25 tells you Messiah Nagid, Messiah the Prince, and then you read verse 26, and the people of the Nagid, which would still be the Messiah. And see, now we have the people with an ethnicity, right? The Jews, of course, right? Because the earlier the prophecy said 70 weeks are determined for thy people and thy holy city, right? Who would be those people? This one ethnicity, right? So right here, I'm just like, when you have the Jewish calendar that says one thing, and it looks like this text is saying one thing, why are you going to continue to fight? You know, it just doesn't make sense to me. But now you'd have to say that the people of the Antichrist are the Jews. So now it's almost like you're promoting like a lot of anti-Semitism. You might say, no, we don't believe it's the Jews that are the people of the Antichrist, but that's what it kind of sounds like, and that's what you would. I mean, if you want to insist this is the Antichrist, we need to insist that those people of the Antichrist are the Jews, and maybe we should be a little anti-Semitic. Maybe we should go after the Jews and be really mad and be really angry, and any Jew that's walking around, just go get him, because that's what it would say. But I'm telling you, it's the prince here. It's not the Antichrist, and we don't need to do that to Jews. We don't need to do that to them, right? Because the people of the prince is Jesus. So all we got to do is just, hey guys, this was your Messiah, and then the prophecy adds up, right? I mean, we don't need to get crazy and demand that the text has to say that, because someone else, you guys might be like, well, my futurist interpretation doesn't say that the people are the Jews. Well, that's yours. But if we want to really get and be honest with the Hebrew, and let's say that no, it demands that this is the Antichrist, well, then then the Jews are the people of the Antichrist. That I don't know, because what other ethnicity? And when you read the entire Bible, if you guys think I'm going way too far on this, show me any place in the Bible where you see the word am and you see no, like, it's just am, but they don't state what people. Because normally, and I've searched, I've used AI. I'm pretty sure I got this. I got this straightened out, because I wanted to make sure, because I felt a little stupid when I talked to Dr. Antonio, like, oh man, maybe I didn't have this quite right. But then when I went back and read it and started to really understand the difference between am and goy, I was like, okay, I was right, but I was a little off. So every time you see am, you're always going to see like a people associated with it. Like, you're never going to see the word am and not know like what the ethnicity is. Like, show me one other page where the ethnicity of am is ambiguous. Like, who are these people? So you would be able to figure out whatever the am is, because you wouldn't just say ethnicity. It's like, well, what does that mean? It's like, well, these are these are the people of whoever this prince is. So whatever ethnicity he is, or whatever culture and everything he is, these are the people of him. And so, and in the context of this, the only am I see is when Daniel is getting this prophecy, and it's for his people, which are an ethnicity. We know the Jews are a single identifiable ethnicity, unified ethnicity. So, okay, it's the Jews, right? So the Jews are the people of the prince. If you want to say it's the Antichrist, then the Jews are the people of the Antichrist, right? Yeah, it's as simple as that. And I mean, if someone has another way of understanding this, but I've been going over this for about 4 hours, right? Because when I got home from work, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't way off when I talked to Dr. George Antonio. And now that I did this, and I even posted this on his page because I want to see what he says. Because it's like, well, who's this am? Because to me, it always looks like an ethnicity. And I even showed you in Strong's Concordance, that's what they say it is, ethnos, right? That's how the Greeks would do it. So I'm going to go even further. Because we know a lot of people will still push back and say Cyrus's decree. We know it's not the other decrees because you guys still can't prove the Jews used a 360-day calendar or whatever crazy calendar. And I want you to think about one thing about this calendar argument too. When someone makes a contract with someone, giving a prophecy out is exactly like making a contract. And if I wrote a contract to someone, or you wrote a contract to someone, are you allowed to change the meaning of the words after you write a contract? Or like if you have a constitution, are people allowed to change the meaning of the words after the constitution's written and say, well, no, that word really means this? Or do you have to maintain the same meaning of the words at the time it was written? And I argue if you're an honest person, you have to maintain the words the same. The words have to maintain the same meaning at the time the contract was written. Same goes for prophecy. God wouldn't be much of a prophet if he's like, well, no, I'm just going to make these words mean something totally different. That way I'm still a prophet and I'm still a great God. No, God doesn't have to do that. God can be honest. He's not like man, so he can be honest. So if God can be honest, then God doesn't need to change the words and say, well, now, I'm a little off on that prophecy. I'll make years mean 360 days. Ha ha ha. No, God doesn't need to do that stuff. Man needs to do that stuff, not God. And so you can see when a man is trying to put his man interpretations onto the biblical text, because he's the one doing all this wild stuff, all this wild, complicated stuff that we can't find. And then you got to keep asking them all these questions. And it's almost like you've got to go to them to know the Bible. Because you can't know the Bible yourself, even though the Bible clearly says that Jews never use no 360-day calendar. Where do you get that? And even like I said, you just go look at just go talk to the average Jewish person, grab them, be like, hey man, what's your calendar? Is it like a 354 day, 384 day leap year lunar solar calendar? And they'll be like, yeah, okay. And all you gotta do is just go back home and you type into like AI and go, hey, over a 19-year lunar solar calendar, is it almost the exact same amount of time as a 19-year Gregorian calendar? And the AI will be like, oh, yes, it is. It's only like an hour off at the most, or a couple hours, few hours off. I don't even think it's a day off. I know it's like a couple of hours. I mean, I guess it could be a day, just depending, but for the most part, it's definitely not 7 years, 8 years, 10 years, whatever they want to say, 20 years off, well, all this other, whatever crazy nonsense they say. So, Cyrus never act. So now I'm just going to, just to finish that point, you just have to figure out what 490 years are and just get you got a rough idea of how to figure out this prophecy, and you don't have to do all this complicated stuff where you got to keep going to your Bible teacher or your false prophecy teacher and go, hey, I can't figure this out because the text doesn't say this. So now you got to go to them to figure out these extra words in the text that you didn't see. Like, whoa, wait a minute. You said the 434 years starts up like it's broken into three parts and it's 49 years. Then the 434 years start. Okay, well, where does the 434 years start? Why couldn't you look at the text and read that? Why do you have to keep going to them? See, this to me is like scammy, and there's something wrong with it. Like, they're not good teachers. Like me, someone said, hey, this could possibly be about Jesus. You know what I did? I just blocked out everyone. And I go, okay, let me just find the decrees. I blocked out everything I ever learned. And I said, what's the 4 decrees? Let's just add it up. And that's all I had to do. And see where it landed. Anyway, so Cyrus never actually gives a decree to rebuild Jerusalem. People are like, "Whoa, what, Chris? Yeah, he sure did." And I'll get to that. He only issues a decree to rebuild the temple, because that's all I can see. So this is a crucial point that completely undermines anyone's argument that Cyrus's decree fulfills Daniel 9:25, because Daniel 9:25 specifically requires a decree to restore and build build Jerusalem, not just the temple. So if you think about this, that decree in Ezra 7, that's the one I say starts in 457 BC. That decree is to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. And when I say restore, we're talking about government, priest, law, everything. Cyrus's decree didn't do all that. That's what full restoration means. And that's why that decree actually did restore and rebuild Jerusalem. That was the decree, because that's what started it all. Cyrus's decree only rebuilt the temple, only started the rebuilding of the temple. So it's like, so what did Cyrus's decree actually say? The Cyrus decree is recorded in Ezra 1, verses 1 through 4, and Ezra 6, verses 3 through 5. So let's examine what it actually says. So here's the one in Ezra 1, verses 2 through 4, the decree in 538 BC. Thus says Cyrus the king of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of earth, and he has charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever is among you of all his people, may his God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and rebuild the house of the Lord, the God of Israel. He is the God who is in Jerusalem. So to me, that sounds like just the temple. So the key observation, Cyrus only commands the rebuilding of the temple, the house of the Lord. There's no mention of restoring or rebuilding Jerusalem as a city. See, we don't see the law like we see in Ezra chapter 7. We don't see the money being given to restore the city, anything, man. You have to have the priests, the judges, everything. We do not. The main point is the Jews are allowed to return, but there's no civic, legal, or governmental restoration is given. And there's no mention of restoring or rebuilding Jerusalem as a city. And I'm going to get to why people get confused about this. So Ezra chapter 6, verses 3 through 5, Persian records confirm the same. In the first year of the king Cyrus issued a decree concerning the house of God at Jerusalem. Let the house be built. Let its height be 60 cubits, its width 60 cubits, and let the expense be paid from the royal treasury. So all we see the word house, and we know it means the temple, because look at this. Let its height be 60 cubits and its width be 60 cubits. This is definitely just the temple. City's much bigger than that, right? Key observation. This confirms that Cyrus's decree was only about the temple. Again, no mention of rebuilding Jerusalem's walls, infrastructure, or restoring self-governance, right? So Daniel 9:25 requires a decree to restore and build Jerusalem. Daniel 25 states, from the going forth of the word to restore and build Jerusalem. Cyrus's decree did not fulfill this because it only allows for temple construction, did not mention the Jerusalem's walls, gates, or government or governance, and does not authorize the restoration. Oops, did I skip it? Sorry. Okay. Yeah, did not authorize the restoration of Jerusalem as a functioning city. Thus, Cyrus's decree fails to meet the criteria of Daniel 9:25. If Cyrus had issued a decree for Jerusalem, why was it still in ruins? See, think about that. And I don't get answers from people that want to say Daniel 9 is about a future Antichrist. Well, okay, why was it still in ruins? Well, at least the people who try to say Cyrus's decree starts it all, right? Um, So if Cyrus had a decree had issued a decree for Jerusalem, why is it still in ruins? Over 80 years after Cyrus's decree, Nehemiah still finds Jerusalem in ruins at Nehemiah 1, verse 3, which is 445 BC. Now, that's where some people might want to go, oh, Chris, but see, that shows you that your 457 decree is all wrong. But at this time, the restoration's going on. We see the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. That was a decree that was given to restore the governance and everything. This is just the process, and so it's not completely rebuilt. It's just 12 years into the rebuilding of it, and it's still in ruins, right? It hasn't been perfectly built, but that's not saying that the restoration hasn't started yet. And I'll get into that in another video. That'd probably have to be a whole nother video about the 445 and why 445 makes absolutely no sense. Just as much, it's just as nonsensical as the 538 Cyrus decree. But anyway, the wall of Jerusalem was broken down, its gates were burned with fire. As Cyrus had truly issued a decree to build Jerusalem, why was the city destroyed and defenseless? This proves Cyrus's decree never included the city of Jerusalem, only the temple, because you would expect that after 49 years it would be restored and rebuilt, and it wasn't. It was still in ruin. So how was his decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem? And you want to say all this stuff happens in 49 years, but we don't see it. And most futurists, to be honest, the reason why they know most of the people that listen to them are very ignorant, and they prey on that, right? And when I say prey, I mean prey, like animal preys on another animal, um someone preys on someone who's defenseless, right? Not the good kind of, I'm going to say a prayer to God to you. So I mean, make sure I put that straight to people. um, they like to prey on people and their ignorance and their stupidity, and they go, well, these people don't know much about history. And at the time you could get away with it for several decades. Like like when I grew up, it was easy to get away with that because there was no internet. Who would even know to look this stuff up and look at all the trouble you would have to go to look it up? You'd have to first figure out what book it would possibly be in, what book, and who would even know? Like, how do you know about books, right? Because everything's based off of newspaper, magazines. It's not like you can go get on the internet and ask someone. And yes, you got telephones, but how do you got a phone book and go, well, who in the phone book knows this? No, you can't do that. See, we're at a whole new advantage because we can go and type and share information and find, oh, hey, this website, this has got, the archaeology you need, and we can go look this up. So these people were getting by with people's ignorance and knowing that, oh, they can't look this stuff up, and they could just go to a verse and say, oh yeah, look, Cyrus, he has this decree to build Jerusalem, and they could just assert, oh, and a lot of people didn't know the dates, and they went and challenged the preacher because they'd be like, well, it's impossible for me to know the dates. So maybe the preacher has the same problem. There were dates, there were ways to find them, but a lot of people didn't know how to go about doing it, didn't know how to go about challenging these people. And so when they're reading a word, they read, the Bible, that, Cyrus shall, uh, build the city or something. They're thinking, oh, okay, this is a prophecy. That prophecy has come true. But when you read it, and I'll get down to that part eventually, but you'll see that it's like when you really look at those words, it's not actually to build it. But so these people just got away with this for the longest time. So people want to know, like, oh, why were these people teaching this for so long? Well, this is why. It was real hard to double check it. But they don't have an excuse now. And so it's like now when they're studying it and you see all these people like Robert Breaker and all these other people, and I call them a false teacher, and then people go and kick me off their YouTube channels and block me, and they get mad at me and they want to talk down to me. No, they are false teachers. They don't have they have no way of substantiating this. There's not a single person that would, I don't think there's a single person that would dare debate me on this subject. Because I think they would get humiliated at this point. So, oops. Oh, I just realized. I'm sorry. I see that there's people in on the chat. Hey, Wax. Oh, you say the calendar is based on the barley spring harvest, so it works out at the same as the Gregorian sun calendar. They add an extra month when the barley are late. Well, Wes, I would say you go watch my video with Herb Selinsky, because it's not based on the barley at all. It's based on the lunar solar calendar. And the lunar solar calendar will keep the barley naturally in harvest time. So I don't know if that's what you're saying, but if you're trying to argue for the barley, and I don't know, sometimes people, when they make comments, they come out odd, and they don't, that's not what they mean, but I know it's definitely a lunar solar calendar. But they never add an extra month when the barley's late. The Jews add the extra month when they see that the crescent moon is not going to happen before the equinox. So, basically, it just a real brief understanding of this is that the Jews have 12 months in a biblical year, right? Well, I'll just say there's 12 months in a biblical year, because this isn't just a Jewish calendar. This is the biblical calendar. This calendar was around before Jews ever existed. So the biblical calendar is where you got 12 months in a year. But now a month cannot be part of two separate years. So this is why you have a leap month, because that you cannot have like a month be part of 2 years. It just doesn't make sense. Like that month needs to belong to 1 year. It's either belonging to the prior year or the next year. And so the equinox divides that, right? And so if that moon is not you have to have a crescent moon on or after the equinox. And so as soon as the sun goes down at around, let's just say 6 o'clock, okay? So as soon as you see the sun go down, if you can't spot a crescent moon in the sky, then the month hasn't started yet. So let's say it's the equinox. The equinox happens. Now the sun goes down. Oh, I see a crescent moon. Now I know it's the first month of the new year. But now if it goes down and I don't see, and like, let's say it's still it's a half of a moon. Well, I know it's still the prior year. And you're going to kind of know that anyway, because it's like as you know, a year typically has only 12 months. So it's like, if you're not getting close to the equinox and you see that it's like the middle of the moon and stuff, well, you pretty much know that this is the 13th month. Like if it's it's like the 1st of March, and you see a half of a moon up in the sky, because I think the equinox is on like the 18th. So if you see like a half of a moon, well, it's there you're gonna have to. This is still like if that's the 13th moon, that's still part of the prior year. So it's kind of briefly. I'm not going to go into it too much because it's a little complicated for people. But and if you look at Babylonian records, the Jews named their months off the Babylonian months because they basically were keeping the exact same calendar. That's why they went on ahead and shared the names. It's like, well, I might tell my boss, hey, I need Saturday off, right? I won't say Sabbath. I'll say I need Saturday off. But and if I write something, I'll say, on Saturday, this happened to me. That doesn't mean that like I'm some pagan or something. It just means that like I'm just using the timekeeping of the time, and we know that typically if it's Saturday. Now, at that time, in the Babylonian, like, okay, Jewish calendar, sun goes down at in the evenings. That would start a new day, but we know a Gregorian day doesn't start till 12. But the Babylonians and the Jews didn't have that problem because when the sun went down, they both started a day, a new day when the sun went down. So when they got everything in sync, it wasn't that big of a deal to just claim their same names. Just so everyone knows what they're talking about. But anyway. So Ezra 7:25 through 26 grants Ezra authority to appoint judges and to enforce the law of God in Jerusalem, thus legally restoring it. This aligns with Daniel 25, the Hebrew words restore, which is tashuv, and build, which is nibnatah, which go beyond just construction and imply full civic restoration, which is something Cyrus didn't do. Neither does the decree. If someone wants to call it a decree, I don't really call it a decree in Nehemiah chapter 1, where Nehemiah gets they say a decree to rebuild the walls. That's still not a full restoration of Jerusalem. Okay, we were talking, it's got to be the laws, everything, the judges, everything. So, I did write something like how to press anyone who still wants to hold this view. It says, where in the Bible does Cyrus issue a decree to rebuild Jerusalem as a city? Why does Ezra 1 and Ezra 6 only mention the temple if Cyrus's decree was supposed to fulfill Daniel 9:25? If Cyrus had decreed the rebuilding of Jerusalem, why was Nehemiah still mourning over its destruction 90 years later? And they won't have good answers for any of this. Let's see here. Some of these are like, okay, so I said some people might still insist that the scriptures demand we use Cyrus's decree. So let's look for linguistic and exegetical nuances that might distinguish Isaiah 45:13 from Daniel 9:25. And there are some key differences that strengthen the argument for Artaxerxes' decree in 457 BC. So this is where people get really hung up on. Isaiah 45:13 says, "He will build my city." That's how it's translated for most people, right? Oops, I need to get this off the screen. Oh, well, let me look at this real quick. 40 years to get Egypt out of Israel, and 40 years after the cross to get the Jew out of the Christian temple destroyed. Well, I don't know exactly what you mean by getting the Jew out of the Christian, because the one thing, and I wrote a lot about this. I wanted to do a video on it last week. I just didn't have the time to. But I believe the problem is that people need to be Judaized, and I know people will just freak out because of how the Roman Catholic Church has used the word Judaize, because I'll say Judaizing. Paul was Paul was preaching against Judaizing. He was against Judaizing, but he wasn't. You know why I say this? Because Judaizing, what's the Jewish religion? Oh, it's the scriptures. See, the Jews weren't even Judaizing themselves because they weren't even obeying their own scriptures. If they would have known their scriptures and accepted their scriptures, which is what Daniel 9 is, oh, well, this must be the Messiah. Oh, just accept it, right? Jesus was doing everything spoken of, everything prophesied about. He even gave them the sign of Jonah, 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Right? He did all these things and raised again, and people knew he was raised, saw all these miracles. They're the ones who rejected their own scriptures. Gave sight to the blind. That was in their scriptures. He did everything. So the problem isn't that Judaizing so wicked. It's that what is Judaizing? Like, people, like, they get triggered because they get taught that a certain word means a certain thing, and it doesn't mean that thing if you really think about it. Because it's kind of like me saying, oh man, he's making something more masculine, and yeah, here I am putting on makeup. Oh, look at him, he's masculining himself. How am I making myself more masculine if I'm putting on makeup, putting on a wig, stuffing a bra, putting that under my shirt? And you go, oh, he's making himself more masculine. How you do you even think like that's not so that's in the same way it's not Judaizing. These people rejected their own religion. They're rejecting their own scriptures. So I just think it's like crazy to go that's Judaizing. The problem, people need to be a little bit more thoughtful when they use these words, because when the Jews were trying to get Gentiles to circumcise and all this other stuff, it was unnecessary. It was the fact that they were trying to get him to do unnecessary unnecessary Old Testament customs that they don't need to do anymore. And all they had to do was accept their own religion, and they wouldn't be doing that because they know Jesus did away with that, right? Or Jesus did away with the necessity for some of these things, right? I know some people argue either way. But what I'm saying is, if you want to call that Judaizing, I don't call that Judaizing, because I would say that if you want to say those things are, let's just put all these other arguments aside for now. Let's just make it a given that circumcision, some of this other stuff, was actually done away with. Okay, if that's the case, and that's actually biblical, then it wouldn't be Judaizing to tell people to go do it, because now you're having, it's like, oh, it's Judaizing to build a temple and make sacrifices. That's no. That's not Judaizing, because the scriptures say Jesus did away with that, and also prophesied that he would do away with it. So now if you go back to doing those things, you are not Judaizing. That's something totally different. That's rejecting your scriptures. So you're not Judaizing. So it's really weird how they use that word, because it's basically like they have this replacement theology mindset where they want the Catholic Church to replace Christianity, and they want to have new rules and new priesthood and all this other stuff, and this apostolic succession where it grants the Pope the rights to change times and laws and all this other stuff. But I mean, that's replacement theology, and then they put Judaizing on it and attach that word to make it basically to prop up the Catholic Church. That's my opinion, because to me, the Jesus was a Jew. Okay, I want to be just like a Jew named Jesus, right? I mean, it's like, I don't have a problem with being Judaized, but it's like I do have a problem if someone's trying to make me unjudaized, which would be to reject things that Jesus done away with. And I'm not playing with language, because when someone says modernize, well, if you modernize my car and then hook a horse to it, that's not modernizing my car, right? But that's the word, modernize, right? So Judaize would just be like, you're the Jewish scriptures and believing in them and teaching what they say. And so that's, I don't know, that's my little rant about the whole. I just, when I saw that whole get the Jew out of the Christian, like I don't need the Jew out of the Christian, especially if Jesus was a Jew. I actually need the Jew in the Christian, you know. That's just, I just think a lot of that stuff comes from people not understanding that they kind of been conditioned to think Catholic-y. Because I think that's a Catholic replacement theology mindset when they start using words like Judaizing. And I mean, I had that brainwashed into me for years, you know, like, oh, you're a Judaizer if you do this. But but I never used that term because, to me, even when I was a kid, even before I thought, oh, these people are wrong who are teaching me all this stuff. It just seemed like a weird concept to me because I was like, well, Jesus is a Jew, and the scriptures are Jew. What in the world? But you're supposed to hate Judaizing? It just never made sense to me. But anyway, Daniel 9:25 says, "It shall be restored and built, Jerusalem." The difference in the Hebrew words, well, we got kind of taken away with my little rant. So I was talking about Isaiah 45:13 saying, "He will build my city," because I said a lot of people get stuck on this word thinking, well, but the Bible, Isaiah is prophesying saying he will build my cities, speaking about Cyrus, right? And so we're going to go into that build part because we don't want to call Isaiah a false prophet, right? But yet we know Cyrus definitely didn't build the city, so he would have to be a false prophet, right? Because he didn't build the city. So how's all this working? And that's what I'm going to get into. So Daniel 9:25 says, "It shall be restored and built, Jerusalem." The difference in the Hebrew verbs is crucial here. The verb in Isaiah 45:13, I don't know how you pronounce this Hebrew. I'm going to Yivni or Yivna or Yav. I don't know. Yivni. He will build. Maybe it's Yivni. I don't know. He will build. The word Yivni, Yivne, is from Bana, meaning to build, construct. This verb is the simple future tense imperfect. Hey, Mark, here. Oh, sure, man. In context, it refers to Cyrus issuing a decree that allows the building to happen, which aligns with Ezra 1. It does not imply Cyrus personally is overseeing the work. This is consistent with Isaiah's general prophetic style, where leaders are credited for initiating actions that others complete. So, at least you came right here because I don't know how to even pronounce these words.
Yivne. Yivne or tashuv is almost like it's from the word teshuva, to repent, but tashuv can also mean to rebuild. So they're kind of
That's
cognitive words.
interesting.
Yeah, teshuvah means to repent, but tashuv to rebuild, to restore. So if you are repenting, in a sense, you are rebuilding your relationship with the Holy One. Tashuv.
Yeah, because my whole thing is, I know some people are. I don't know how long you've been listening, but you
I
know what?
came on just a little bit ago, but
Yeah,
I
because
was
I
doing
was
some other
trying to
stuff.
go over this right here because a lot of people get stuck on saying Cyrus's decree. It's got to be Cyrus that starts the prophecy because it says he will build, and if Cyrus wasn't the one, then that would make Isaiah a false prophet. So, but in Chris, you're saying that the temple, that that the city wasn't rebuilt, and even history says it wasn't rebuilt. So does that mean Isaiah is a false prophet, right?
Yeah,
So
I kind of just jumped in, so I really, my brain ain't on track right now with all this that you're
okay.
talking about. But I wanted to jump in and kind of see what you were doing.
Yeah, because I was just wanting to go into like the Hebrew arguments of, like, Daniel, because I started earlier. I was talking about and Nagid in 925, right? Because I think that points to, heck, maybe I should just go here, man, because I do want to get your thoughts on this real quick. You know what? Let me bring up. Okay, so because in like verse, oops, let me get this into the screen here. Okay, so we know in verse 25 it talks about Messiah Nagid, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm doing in verse 25 is it says, and after the week 62 shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself, and the city and the sanctuary shall destroy the people, and it's got M for people, right? And it's got Nagid here. I'm saying because we only see one Nagid, it seems natural to think this is Messiah the Prince still. And to compound that, this word am, to me, that means, if I got my Hebrew right, ethnicity. So it's like different, like so it's got to be like the people have to be an ethnicity of the prince, if I'm understanding that right. Because, like, let's say America is a goy, if I'm understanding right. An American would still be goy because they're not an am. Like, you
Well,
wouldn't
what are
say.
the question is, so are you with this Nagid, the second Nagid, referring to the first one says Mashiach Nagid, so obviously the Messiah Prince is one aspect, but are you asking the second part where it says Am Nagid? Are you saying that's the same Prince, the Messiah?
I, I, it, I would think it is, because I only see one Nagid in here, but now I know Nagid can be used for other leaders and rulers. It doesn't have to necessarily be a divinely appointed leader, but but a lot of times in the Bible it does look like it points to a divinely appointed leader. But the fact that we see Am there, it's like Am is normally like when it's by itself. Well, what ethnicity would it be? And I would have to just say that it has to be pointing back to the Jews, because it says, like, in the first in Daniel 24, it says 70 weeks have been determined for thy people, thy Am, and thy holy city, right? So you could use Am there because it's definitely referring to the ethnicity, because we know the Jews as a people are like are one single culture ethnicity. So it's proper to use Am there. It doesn't say, for thy goy. But I don't know if I'm going too far with this argument, like, because I don't know, like, because I just noticed a pattern, but maybe this pattern's wrong. It could be like noticing sight and vision and thinking that, oh, a sight, vision means one thing and sight means another. And like, if I wasn't an English speaker, right?
Yeah, the question would be, is the Prince that comes, is that Prince that comes, is that Prince the one that destroys the city and the sanctuary?
Well, when I'm reading this, and maybe I'm reading the Hebrew wrong, I thought the Hebrew sounded sort of like it's the people of the prince that will destroy the city and the sanctuary, because I thought it was like their rejection of the Messiah that led to the destruction of the city and the sanctuary, based on also Matthew 24, where Jesus prophesizes the destruction of Jerusalem.
Well, I mean, my opinion is a little different because
Sure,
I
man.
don't believe. But again, it's not to be. It's nothing. It's just different ideas. I think that's what people need to look at is because I guess this conception that in my opinion, is in the first century when the Messiah came, the what led to the destruction of the temple was the fact that they did not reject him. It had they rejected him, the temple wouldn't have needed to be destroyed. No one would have rebelled. They would have said it's not the Messiah. The fact that they believed he was Messiah was what led to the destruction of the temple, because once he was put to death, they were thinking he was going to come back imminently to help them fight the Romans, and they had a lot of messianic fervor, and so attacked, started causing insurrections in Rome. In 67 AD, James was killed, James, his brother, James that became the overseer, and it ended up in a massive insurrection, and then ultimately the Romans knew they had to come in and destroy the temple and quell the masses because of the messianic fervor. And in the book of Acts, it says many who believed were obedient to the Torah. So there were a lot of priests that converted. There were a lot of people that were believing in the Torah. And because of that, they believed Yeshua was Messiah, but they had a misconception on what his office would be. They felt that he would come right back. Many of them fled to Masada and things to await for his return. And he didn't return imminently. And the temple was ultimately destroyed, in my opinion. So I think the misconception is that people all rejected Jesus. One of the priests said it's more expedient for one man to die than the whole nation should be destroyed. Why did he say that? Because if they accept this man, it's going to be dangerous, because we know that there's going to be a massive uprising. They're going to expect Mashiach to destroy Rome, and it would be better for this one man to die instead, is what the Pharisees felt like. So the upper establishment, they rejected him, but a lot of people in Israel were accepting Yeshua, I think, and I think Jesus, and I think that's why it led to the ultimate destruction of the temple. But I think the Messiah, I think Jesus was directing a lot of his condemnation to the hierarchy in Israel, saying, you guys have rejected me, and you cause your people to suffer. You don't give the Torah out like you're supposed to. You don't show mercy and justice and truth like you should. But I think a lot of the people were believing in the Messiah. But nevertheless, so my opinion is that the prince that comes destroying the temple is not Yeshua, but a Roman prince possibly. But that's just my take on it. So I think that there are two different nagids here, and maybe they're using it as a play on words in the Hebrew. That the Mashiach prince comes, but then this other Mashiach, this other prince comes.
I didn't even think of the play on words, man. Oh man, yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's almost like saying a true prince comes, but then a false prince comes and destroys the city and the temple.
Because that could even be a play on words, where it's like this: the prince and Mashiach, Prince Messiah came, but now here's your prince that's
so a lot of times in Hebrew
people, right?
It has a play on, there's a lot of play on words in Hebrew and in the Hebrew text and things, and I think that may very well be it.
That's awesome. I never heard that, dude. That's okay. I gotta think about that one. That's a
and just reading the text, it does get very people have argued over these interpretations for hundreds of thousands of years, so you and I, we're not any different, so that's the whole thing. And that's what I like about your show, is that, people need to be able to, they can't get so upset about different, the whole purpose of your show is not to divide people, but to bring people in, to get people to think, you know, you don't have a brainwashing gun in your pocket, you know, like you're shooting people with it. You know, you're just giving them, hey guys, take a look at this. And it motivates people to think, like, don't just take things at face value, really get deep into it and study it and try to understand. And I think there were a lot of Jews that were expecting this Mashiach because they did understand that prophecy. What happened is, after the destruction of the temple, and this Mashiach didn't come back and immediately save, I think it caused many people to fall away after that, and say, well, this must not have been the true Messiah because our temple was destroyed, we're gone. So then afterward, many Jews then started to reject this idea. And as the faith spread into the European, Mediterranean areas in later centuries and started to become polluted by the Vatican philosophies and the Eleusinian mysteries and so on, then they really rejected it because they go, this is pagan. But originally, I think there was a lot of people who did accept the Messiah, and that's really what destroyed the city and the sanctuary and everything, because they accepted him, and it caused a fervor, and I think it caused a panic in Rome. And they said these people are gonna rebel, and we have to go in and what was the focus point of their religion was the temple. So they went in and just devastated the temple and destroyed the religion, or at least they thought they did, by doing so. But I think Yeshua anticipated it, obviously, and told them that it was going to be destroyed. But I don't think he was necessarily attacking every person. I think he was attacking more so the hierarchy, the establishment, Pharisees and the temple authorities, and he was telling them they have rejected the Messiah, because they were, he said, what did he say? You go forth to make a proselyte, and you make them 2 times fold the son of Gehenna than yourself, but yet at the same time, you could see in the New Testament, in the masses of the people, it seemed like the people were accepting Yeshua. And then again, in the book of Acts, it says many were obedient to the Torah and they believed in the Messiah. So there were, and then Nicodemus and others, who were secretly believing in Yeshua, because they were afraid, but at the same time, they believed, but they didn't want to tell the other religious establishment Pharisees that they believed in him, because they were wanting to reject him because they were afraid of their losing their authority in the temple. They were more worried about temporal authority than they were eternal, redemption. So they rejected him because of that, and they looked down upon him, not understanding the scripture, not understanding the prophecies, possibly. So I think that's why I think it's, my feeling is in that text that it is talking about another prince that comes, that the people of that prince that come destroy the temple, is referring to possibly the fourth beast, the revived Rome, or the Roman Empire coming in. That's how I take that context.
Okay, so see, what I do is I basically run different thoughts through the AI because I don't know quite how to interpret Hebrew, right?
Right. I understand.
Call you up, man, or my other Hebrew friends, and be like, ask them weird questions at like 3:00 in the morning.
Right.
But I mean, I do try my best to kind of like hone in and try to figure out what some of these words mean and how they're used. So, so my question is, because am I wrong when I'm reading that, when I was interpreting it as the people would destroy the city and the sanctuary, or does the Hebrew clearly say it's the prince?
Well, the way it says, that's the it's hard to look at it's hard to look at because I don't know how. Do you want me to get?
I can bring up a different version.
Yeah, because I don't know how they. I don't know if it's going this way, that way, because Hebrew reads from left to right. But when they do the transliteration, when sometimes they do them in reverse, so I'm trying to see the Hebrew text as the English text. But But I think what it's saying is the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the sanctuary. So you have the Messiah, the prince, and then you have these people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. While the Romans destroyed the sanctuary and sacked Jerusalem. So, that's why I believe that's what it's stating. It's almost like an antithesis of a Messiah prince and then another prince that comes that destroys the city and the sanctuary.
Okay. Hold on. Is this? I don't know if this is any better.
It probably is better. I just can't hardly see anything because I'm getting old.
Oh.
He should be cut off, but not for himself. And both the city and the holy place, the nation of the coming emperor will destroy. And I believe that.
I don't like this translation at all. But
let me see.
I was hoping you could just see the Hebrew, but I can.
Yeah, I'm looking to try to see how they constructed it and see why they're translating. People of the prince that comes should destroy the holy place. I mean, see, that's what I'm saying is, in my opinion, the way they translate it, they're using more of an idiomatic translation instead of a more literal translation. But because they use at the top, it shows that the Messiah will be cut off, but then it says they use the word Nagid in the second one, but they translate it emperor instead of prince. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I don't like inconsistent.
Well, because they're alluding to the fact that it's a different prince is what the interpretation is saying, or at least maybe the interpreters believe that that's what it's referring to as well. I mean, a lot of versions do that. They're not going to be all, they're not going to translate every word 100% consistently every time. I mean, the King James Version does the same thing. A lot of times it'll translate, for example, Pneuma Hagios as Holy Spirit sometimes, and then Holy Ghost at other times, which I don't believe ghost is a proper translation, but this one, the city, V'ha'ir, the holy place, the city, and the V'ha'kodesh is the holy place it's talking about. It says that the nation of the people, they're translating the word as nation of the coming emperor, of the emperor who comes. So Nagid Habo. Habo means to come, and Ketz, that this word right after Habo, which I can't explain, it means, Ketz means the end of something, and then so it's just saying it's going to destroy it. And I mean, I think the only difference is they translated the term Nagid two different ways in the same context, but I think they did it to differentiate between the Messiah, the prince, and a coming prince, which would be the interpreter probably believed was the Roman prince coming. You see what I mean? That would come and destroy the holy city and on the holy place, which was Rome historically, that came in and destroyed it, and they had the 10th Roman Legion that surrounded Masada and ultimately ended up, attacking them, and then they committed suicide and all that stuff.
I can't believe you can remember all those details off the top of your head, man. I would never got like 10th Roman Legion and Masada and all that right off the top of my
Yeah,
head. Like
because they were the last. They held out the last up to the end, and you had, I think it was Eliezer ben Yehuda and some of the other men in Masada, and they had enough stuff and provisions to last, but they decided that they didn't want their women and things to be. They knew they'd go into slavery if they were captured, so they ended up committing suicide. And when the Romans came up and took over Masada, they found grains and tons of grain, tons of food and everything. And it said that the Romans then almost had some pity and thought, man, these were honorable people because they died for their belief, so they kind of looked up to him a little bit, like, wow, who would do this? Who would not just give up instead? But no, they would rather die than to become slaves to the Romans, So they, I think it's in the book of Josephus that, he talks a little bit about it in the works of Josephus. I have somewhere around here. So that's the whole conundrum is I think people, and I think that's where some of this, I hate to say it, but some of the anti-Semitism comes, or the Judaism, Judaizing stuff comes from, is because they have this concept that all the Jews just rejected the Messiah, but yet the Jews had been anticipating a Messiah for thousands of years. So they just, when he came, I think it was more a threat to the establishment Jews that were running the temple and had kind of compromised themselves to the Romans, because you got to think Herod came in, Herod the Great, he wasn't even a Jew. He was an Idumean. It was like Arabic and something else. And they had supplanted the government of Judea at that time. And he had married, his wife was a Maccabean. He murdered her. He murdered his son. He murdered all the trace of the Maccabean bloodline because he was so jealous, and because his son came out one time wearing the high priest robe, and everybody in Jerusalem was praising him, and so his father ended up killing him. And so the Herodians had accommodated to Rome, basically, but you had a lot of zealots, the Sicarii. That's where you get Judah Iscariot, and he was a Sicarii, a zealot, and a lot of them were rebelling, and that's where you get the Qumran sect. They were hiding out in the wilderness camps, awaiting the Messiah to come, and it's in the book of Habakkuk. It's in a lot of their writings, the Moreh HaTzadik, the teacher of righteousness that would come. So I think there was a lot of anticipation of this massive, the coming of Mashiach and this imminent war with Rome, and that the Mashiach would destroy Rome and he would conquer the nations and all of that. But yet, when Yeshua was put to death and then he resurrected, ascended, but a lot of these people then believed that he would come back imminently. So they ushered in to fulfill the vision in a sense. And when they fought against Rome, Rome was way more powerful than them and came in and just basically devastated them. And then there were still uprisings from like 67 AD all the way up to 135 AD when Shimon Bar Kokhba, Simon Bar Kokhba or Kokhba, came forth and proclaimed himself like a Messiah and fought and liberated Rome for a little while, or Jerusalem for a little while, and then ultimately, it was taken back and everything, and everybody kicked out of Jerusalem and Israel in those areas, and it was called Aelio Capitolina, and then later, Palestina, by the Romans. That's where you get the word Palestine from now, but it wasn't in reference to the Arabs per se. It was just that area was called Palestina, whoever was living there at the time. So I think it's more so that prophecy is showing that the Messiah is cut off, and the city ends up being destroyed, and you know, so I think that it does, the timeline that you talk about a lot, it does fulfill that timeline of the Messiah as being Yeshua in that time. And so later on, as as the separation between Christianity in a sense and Judaism spread, the Jews then started to forbid prophecy in a sense, trying to predict in Orthodox Judaism and stuff. I mean, there's a lot of things about Orthodox Judaism that I don't subscribe to, but there are as far as keeping the holy days and the Torah and things of these nature. I mean, it's it's basically correct. I mean, but even during the time of Yeshua and his time, there was not a united, cohesive form of Judaism at that time either. I mean, there were different groups: the Ebionim, the Ebionites, the Qumran sect, the Pharisees, the Sadducees. But there were two different forms of Sadducees. Even there was the establishment Sadducees, and there were the Maccabean Sadducees that were different, and their beliefs were totally different. And there were some prophecies back then that believed up to 4 messiahs coming and stuff. There was not a real cohesive understanding of just one narrative story like people believe. I don't think. And I think there's a lot of ties to the Qumran sect and the believers in Messiah, the people of the way, the Der, because if you read the writings of the Qumran scrolls, they talk about the new covenant in the land of Damascus, and there's a lot of things in there. They talk about the poor, the Ebionim. Of course, Yeshua always mentioned the poor, and so there was a lot of ties. So the Catholic Church tried to divorce the idea of Qumran being in the first century, and they tried to push it back and tried to make people believe that the Qumran sect was like a bunch of monks or something, and they weren't. They were more like warriors they were more like Sicarii or holy warriors, that were waiting for a ultimate battle, the war of the sons of light with the sons of darkness, and they were believing that they were going to overthrow Rome and stuff, So they were out in the wilderness camps practicing to be pure, because they felt if they were purified enough that the Malachim, the angels, would come down and fight the battle with them in the end time apocalypse. According to the Dead Sea Scrolls that you read, I've done an extensive amount of study on those, and that's what they believed. There's a scroll called the War Scroll. There's the one, the War of the Sons of Light with the Sons of Darkness. There's a scroll called Tongues of Fire. They've got a lot of wild scrolls that they found that in the Qumran caves, and then but they found a lot of the same text too, and the text that they have in the Masoretic text were almost exact 1,000 years before. There's only small differences in the text, which shows the integrity of these scribes in writing over and over these texts and preserving them, which is pretty interesting too. But I don't know if that helps. I went off on a tangent.
Interesting information, man. But yeah, I just want to get on to just a couple of points, because when I'm looking at this, even their translation, they make it sound like it's the nation of the coming emperor that will destroy, or the coming prince that will destroy. So it's not the emperor himself; it's the nation.
Right. It's the people of that nation. The armies that come in.
Yeah. So and to me, and maybe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but would still be more of an ethnic group, because when I'm looking up at the Strong's Concordance, when the Greek translates the Hebrew into Greek, they use the word ethnos, right? They don't use the word just like it's not just like you wouldn't call America an ethnicity. You know, it's like we're made up of a bunch of ethnos, but we're not one ethnicity. And so um to me that word nation is a very particular word, and that's why I would still, I'm just wondering, am I wrong? I mean, you can say it's ambiguous, but do you think I'm wrong with saying that I'm tying it into the nation back into Israel and the Nagid into Jesus? Do you think that's wrong, or you just got
That
a
the
different
second portion
interpretation?
of it, where it says the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and sanctuary,
Yeah.
I don't think it's referring to Yeshua and the Israel people, my opinion. But that's just my opinion based on what I understand about it. I think it's showing a contrast. It's showing that you have the Messiah, the Prince, and because later on you think about how Yeshua says that in uh, when he's talking in Revelation, many shall come forth and say they are the Mashiach, and they shall deceive many, and so on. So, in my opinion, it almost shows like that antithesis in this, and saying you've got the Mashiach, the Prince, that gets cut off, but then you have these Prince of the people that shall come. They will destroy the sanctuary in the city. So I don't, because it was not. I mean, if you could look at it philosophically, you could argue or debate, well, it was the rejection of the Jews that resulted in the destruction of the temple and so on. But my opinion is that's even debatable because I don't believe necessarily that's the case. I think it was a mixture of a misunderstanding of what Mashiach was going to do, that when they seen that Yeshua was here and they looked at the prophecy of Daniel and they said, well, this is the time, and so on and so forth, and he did certain things, they felt this was Mashiach. But they felt possibly after his death and resurrection that if they because in book of Daniel, remember, it says there's a scripture that says that many will go forth to how do they word it? They will go forth to try to fulfill the vision. So I think that it's almost like some modern Christians who want to like almost usher in the apocalypse. It's like they're waiting for Jesus, so they want to build the temple so we can, and all this stuff that they feel is going to usher in the apocalypse. I mean, the Holy One will send the Messiah when he's ready to. Anything that we do or don't do, all we can do is be holy and serve the Heavenly Father. But I think it's almost like that. They sought to fulfill that vision because they believed that Yeshua was the coming Messiah. And so they felt, well, he'll come back with 10,000s of his saints to render judgment. And so they fought to try to overthrow Rome, thinking that they would have this temporal power, and it didn't happen. And because of that, many of them fell away from the faith of that after that, and they didn't believe in Yeshua anymore. He must not have been the Messiah because he didn't come and save us from Rome, and Rome destroyed the temple and so on. And I think that's what happened. But those who believed and knew, they separated away. The Manim, they called them, and so the Orthodox Jews then kicked them out of the synagogues because they wrote the 18 benedictions, the Amidah, I think it's called the 18 benedictions. What they do is they made it so that a believing Jew would not be able to go into a synagogue because they basically rejected Yeshua. So those Jews had to stop going to the synagogue. So it kind of separated them. But remember, there was a time that Yeshua even told his people that, there's going to come a time when they shall kick you out of their synagogues because you believe in me as Mashiach. So the problem was it wasn't that Jews didn't believe there was a coming Messiah. It's just that the establishment, I felt like, more so they were threatened by Yeshua, and they rejected him in spite of the fact that they may even have believed he was, it's almost that way. It's like they were jealous, they were envious, they didn't want to lose their power, they wanted to hold on to their temporal power in the nation, and so they go, well, it's more expedient to hand this man over for what have you, and then for our whole nation to be destroyed. But there were many people believing in the Messiah. I mean, I think that's in a lot of the records, because after the death of Yeshua and the resurrection, he basically James took over as the overseer in Jerusalem, and according to Josephus and early historical writings and some of the church fathers, James went to the temple to debate, and many would say that he would go there, and they said many revered James, but the establishment Pharisees there attacked him and killed him. They threw him off the pinnacle of the temple, which is interesting. It's the Hakanaf Panim, the pinnacle of the temple that we were talking about in Daniel, where it says, on the wing of the temple you shall see the abomination of desolation taking place in the holy place. And I thought about that, and I thought, what abomination did they do? Well, they killed James by throwing him off the pinnacle of the temple.
I did wonder about that, because that in my book, I kind of was like debating if I should put that in my book as a possibility.
Yeah, but I just thought about that. They took James the Just, the brother of Jesus, who was succeeded after Yeshua. And in the Gospel of Thomas, there's a known quote. Remember, the disciples come to Jesus and say, what are we to do? And he said, when you go to Jerusalem, you are to go to James the Just, for whom heaven and earth was made, is a quote, at least an attributed quote from the book of the book of Thomas. So it almost shows that, Yeshua had chosen his brother James to Jacob, or Jacob, James, to be the successor. And then he would go to the temple, and there was a lot of early writings about James as being a very holy person. They said that his knees were like leather because of the amount of the time that he would pray. They said his knees were like as leather, and he had long hair and a beard, and he was a Nazarite, basically. That he didn't cut his hair or shave his beard. He didn't drink alcohol or strong drink. He was almost like James John the Baptist, in a sense, that same type of mentality. And then when they killed him in 67 AD, after that, they says that some of the early church fathers say that the ultimate uprising and destruction of the temple was because of the death of James the Just. So, which is interesting, because so in my opinion, it shows almost an opposite view. It was, you had believers against the establishment. It was like the deep state of the Israel, the Pharisees. Yeah, they were the deep state, in a sense, because they wanted to hold on to their temporal power, and so they rejected Yeshua as this Messiah, whereas the people, for the most part, I think more so accepted him, and some of the priests and some of the Pharisees did accept him. So I think it caused a big uproar in Israel, and the Romans had to put it down, and then after that, basically effectively squashed it, and then Christianity more so started to spread. Excuse me, 1 second. That's my wife.
Sure.
Hello. Yes.
I'll hit the mute button so we're not catching your conversation. Okay, he walked away. I don't have to do that. Or maybe I should hit the mute button. I don't know how to mute him, though. Sorry about that. There we go. Mute him temporarily. So, now, even though he's got that interpretation, I still want to look that up and see about this nation, because I asked the AI like several times about and it's normally like the occurrences I saw, it was always like an ethnicity. Like I showed you earlier when I went through the Strong's Concordance, it always refers, and the Roman people are not a particular ethnicity. So I really want to actually talk to him about that, but I might later get like someone else who knows Hebrew to come on here and verify if I'm like crazy and wrong about that. I really want to get to this other argument about Cyrus though, but I'm gonna look something up while he's gone. So we'll look up I don't know why is it. Okay, so this is mine. All right. I'm gonna ask it in the Bible. So in the Bible, are there any instances of the Hebrew word used in which it does not refer to a specific ethnic group of people? For instance, does it ever refer to a group like Americans as instead of Goy? And I'm using Chat GPT-01, which should give me a real deep dive into everything. This is I'll unmute you, Mark. No, I won't. So we're gonna. I'd like to have it read this so I don't have to read it, but it's got to print all this stuff out first. Oh, Mark, you're back. Hold on. I gotta unmute you, man.
The complete
I
works
muted
of
you because I didn't want
Josephus.
to hear your conversation, just in case it was personal, man.
No, you're fine. It was just my wife calling. One of the tires on the truck, it gets flat quick. I think it's the alloy rim is slightly bent or something. So, that's how it is.
I did have to ask the Chat GPT while you were gone because I'm still hung up on that word. All right. So I go, in the Bible, are there any instances of the Hebrew word used in which it does not refer to a specific ethnic group of people? For instance, does it ever refer to a group like Americans as instead of Goy? And so this is the response I got. I wish I could have it just read it out loud so we could all hear the response. Oh, yeah, I can. Oops, no, I can't. Hold on. I don't want to do it like that. Oh, here we go.
First, it is important to recognize that in Biblical Hebrew, the word most often means people, in the sense of a nation or an ethnically kin-based group, most frequently referring to Israel, the people of Israel, or another clearly bounded nation, e.g. the people of Moab, the people of Midian, etc. By contrast, Gui Goy also means nation, but can be used of Israel itself, e.g. Gui Kadosh, a holy nation, in Exodus 19:6, or of other nations. In biblical usage, then, and Goy both refer to nations or peoples, though often focuses on an internal, kin-based identity, my people, whereas Goy more frequently emphasizes a distinct nation among the nations. Does it ever refer to a non-ethnic or modern group, like Americans? 1. No mention of Americans or equivalent modern groups. Obviously, the biblical text does not reference Americans or any modern
That's not
nation
what I
formed
meant.
long after the biblical period. There is no instance in the Bible where or goy is used to refer to anything resembling the American people. 2. Almost always tied to an ethnic national identity. In virtually every biblical context, refers to Israel as a coherent community nation, e.g., Ami Yisrael, my people Israel. Another recognized nation or ethnic group, e.g., Moab, the people of Moab, Midian, the people of Midian, etc. The people, more generally, but still in the sense of a specific populace, the citizens or mass of a given ethnic political community. For instance, when a king addresses the people, that people are typically his own subjects, i.e., a specific national group. 3. Occasional broader sense of multitude or crowd. Occasionally, is used simply for the crowd or the common people in a setting, but it still has reference to a population that is by and large ethnically or nationally defined, e.g., the people of Jerusalem, i.e., the inhabitants of Judah, Israel. Because of this, there is no instance in the Hebrew Bible where is applied to a modern or purely civic political group such as Americans. Indeed, biblical Hebrew does not have a category for referring to something like an American nation, or a modern national identity separate from a tight ethnic or tribal identity. If modern Hebrew writers speak of the American people, Am Amerikai, that is a linguistic usage that arises in much later Hebrew, not from the Bible. Bottom line, biblical Hebrew usage, is consistently tied to a people in the sense of a kinship-based or historically recognized nation, Israel or another ancient nation. It does not appear in the Bible in reference to purely modern civic-based nationalities like Americans. No non-ethnic examples. In the Hebrew Bible, there is no unambiguous example of referring to a grouping that is not at least implicitly ethnic or national. Even when it just means the crowd or the populace, it is still the crowd/populace of a recognized nation, e.g., Israel or another ancient Near Eastern group. Hence, you will not find referring to an entity like Americans anywhere in biblical usage, nor will you find it used without some notion of a shared kinship or national identity.
See, I'm just wondering, is the Roman nation, is that enough to put it under the term That's what
the term in Hebrew, from my understanding of Hebrew, is more of a generic term, people. But it, just like this Chat GPT said, it can be referred to as the nation of Israel or another ancient nation. But it's as opposed to any modern nations, but any other nation, the term can be used. Where the term goy is, I believe, more so would be. It's almost more so tied to something more pagan, almost like nations that would specifically worship idols or something of this, to some extent. But it doesn't mean that they can never be used interchangeably. That's the problem with it. It's the context. But the term is more like nations or people. So in that context, I don't think that that's wrong. Plus, there are instances in the Hebrew Bible you can look up where words are used improperly. I mean, there are some contexts that it is not proper Hebrew, but it was written that way. So, it's not uncommon. So for that, I don't think that that's written. I don't think it's written improperly. I don't think it has to say the goy as opposed to the in that text. Like,
it says in principle, yes, you could call the Romans an if the Bible had to speak of the Romans as a coherent nation, like the people of Moab. why it could in theory apply to Rome. In biblical Hebrew, is used to recognize people or nation, Moab, Midian, Israel, so and so on.
Well, the reason I say that too is you got to think it's a prophecy before Rome happens. So it's not like they are speaking in context as to something that's already occurred. So they're just saying the people of the prince that comes shall destroy the sanctuary in the city. It's more of a prediction. So, the choice of the word could have been a general one. You got these people and you got these people. These people are going to come, and these people are of the prince that are going to come and destroy the sanctuary in the city. That's all I'm saying. So I don't know. I think I don't know if
okay, I kind of see another argument though that I can still probably use, because it seems like, okay, let's say you could tie this to Rome, or now let's say like a dispensationalist tries to insist that that's got to be the Antichrist. Then the Antichrist has to have a nation. Like, it can't just be just a bunch of like people all over the world. It has to be like one single nation of the Antichrist then that would do all that stuff. According to the Hebrew, I'm thinking. Like, because I guess I'm just trying to figure out, man, there's if I guess it's not as tight as I thought it was, with the Hebrew, because I thought the Hebrew was more specific. But I guess it would still have to be like, if that was the Antichrist, it would still have to, the Antichrist himself would have to have his own nation that does all this damage.
Hold on 1 second. Hey, Melina, I just unlocked it because I knew you were coming. Sorry, that was my wife again.
That's all right.
Well, just like here, it says on your verse there up at the top, it says even goy could have been used. The word goy is applied not just to non-Israelite groups, but to even Israel itself as a holy kodesh. Goy kodesh is a holy nation. So that's why I was saying the terms and goy, they don't have to be used specifically like we would think. There are times they're used interchangeably, and also there are times in the Hebrew where sentence structure is improper, but it's written that way for whatever reason. So that's the only reason I was saying that.
Okay.
So it's just the context, I would say more so the context of what they're talking about. So, as far as that is concerned.
Okay, but I mean, we could probably both at least agree that the Hebrew demands that the people of the prince has to be a nation of that prince that are destroying the temple.
More than likely, yeah, the people of
like
that
it can't
prince,
just
yeah.
be like it can't just be just people in general, that are believing in like the Antichrist. Like, I'm just saying, if it was like, if they were gonna try to force the Antichrist on that, it would have to be like the Antichrist has a nation, and this is his nation that is doing all this destruction. Like, it's got to be a specific nation, right? Am I at least understanding that correctly?
Probably.
Because it couldn't just be like a bunch of people all over the world. I don't see how that
right.
work.
No, I think it's directing. I think it's being esoteric for people who would understand. They're saying, "Hey, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary." So I think that it's more like it's, what was the reason for a lot of the prophecy like that was because people knew that if they came out and said this stuff, they were going to be put to death. I mean, in the book of Revelation is written in esoteric ways because at that time, had they come out and just said this stuff in these books, they would have been executed and put to death and things. So it's almost written so that people who would understand, and those who would not understand wouldn't. And also for plausible deniability, probably, is if they come and say, what does this mean? Well, I don't know what it means. It's a red horse. I mean, I don't know what that means, but they know what it means, but they don't want to say what it means. You know what I mean? It's meant. It's like he who has ears to hear, let him hear what the Spirit is saying to the assembly. So, you know, that may be the case. So, because Rome really wasn't an empire at that time of the prophecy, obviously. I think it was Babylon and Medo-Persia was during some of the prophecies of Daniel, but Greece, possibly even Greece, but I don't know about Rome, because Rome, you know, if you take that fourth beast as being the Roman Empire, which I believe that shows it's diverse from the others and so on, then, you know, that's may possibly be the one that the people of the prince come and destroy the temple. Well, when you think about it, who destroyed the temple? It was the Romans. The Romans, so the people of the prince that come and destroy the temple.
Okay, so it says, yes, in biblical Hebrew, the term people, nation can indeed refer to a recognized national group, even if in reality that group is multi-ethnic. So does have to be a nation, or because
it can be people or nation. They translate it both, I think, in the Hebrew, just the context, you know, because it could be the Amim. The Amim is the nations, you know, multiple. So it's you know, not just and I believe there are texts that on my brain right now, but the Amim would be it would be plural of the nations.
Yeah, I did run across yesterday when I was searching these words up.
Yeah. So it's just it's a plurality of the word people or nations.
So I'm wondering if like the meme, like you could have the meme of Bel, but would they have to be under just one single nation, or could they be the or could they be the of Bel, even if they're under multiple nations?
Well, I think it's almost like our term people. I mean, you could look at the Islamic people, which would then identify them as that, or you could just say there are people that hate God. You know what I mean? So then that would be a group of people, not necessarily of any national identity necessarily, but more of a group. So I think it can be used more loosely, just depending on the context. So I think that the term "the people of the prince," it ties the people who are of this prince. So what does that mean? More than likely, the prince has a nation, so these people are of this nation from which this prince comes, who destroys the city and the sanctuary. Well, who destroyed the city and the sanctuary was Rome. So I think that that's why I believe that that's what that context of that scripture is saying in that instance, you know.
Okay. All right. I need to get that down because I don't want to use that argument, man. That's just a waste of time, and that's just like I was just noticing like a pattern, and I thought that applied every time, but now I'm looking at this differently. I'm like, okay, I can see how it could have a broader scope, because when I'm looking at the Strong Concordance, it made it sound like generally refers to like a certain ethnicity or a covenant people, and I was like, well, okay, so maybe I can just use a Hebrew word or grammar argument and word arguments and just show this is got to be about the Jews and Jesus, and it can't be about the Antichrist at all. So now I know I can nip that in the bud, because I guess it's not strong enough, considering that these words got a broader meaning than I was under the impression of. So.
Yeah, it just it just depends, you know, I think is what it is. But they're not always specific. Those are more generic terms. Goy, And I didn't myself. I didn't even know that the term goy was used at times for Israel. I generally thought it was used outside of it. But again, there are instances in the Torah or in the Bible where these grammatic rules are not always consistent. Because if you look up some of them, they will call them an imperfect, I can't think of some of the terms right now in Hebrew, but an imperfect particle of a verb or something, so they're not always exactly written as maybe they should be in the Hebrew tongue, even in some cases. So that's
another thing that was that was throwing me off too, is because when I was looking at goy, unless it said a holy goy, but it looked like it was talking about the goyim, and then I'm going to make you like a holy goy. So it's like, so I'm like, okay, I can understand why he would use holy goy there, because he's kind of pulling out them as a nation out front and setting them apart, and I'm going to make them a holy or a great goy or something like that. But then it's like other times, like all the other times, it looked like he was using and then I would see what is it? Yeah, like when he's like being like more critical of them, like when they're rebelling, I would start to see, like, there's a couple of times where I saw goy used for Israel, and so it looked like it kind of looked like something where it was like maybe like he was like a slight admonishment, like telling him like there's like something more there when he starts using goy, because it's like, oh, now you're like the other nation. So I wasn't sure if there was like more like that going on in text. So
yeah,
that's just what was kind of throwing me off.
Yeah, well, one of the things I was talking about, like, too, in the first century was, if you look in the works of Josephus, that's what I'm looking at now. One of the books I got too many books, but in there, what I was showing was there's chapter 3 in the Wars of the Jews. It says concerning the zealots and the high priest Ananus, and also how the Jews raised seditions one against another in Jerusalem. So there weren't only seditions against Rome, but there were factions fighting each other, because there were some who believed in Yeshua as opposed to those who rejected him. So, that's why I was saying it was not real clear cut, like people sometimes may conceive, if they're not familiar with first century Judaism or first century Israel and history, the average, and I don't mean it as a dispersion, but, the average Christian today, if they don't study all this stuff, you just read the New Testament, you don't really see the turmoil that was taking place at that time, more so, because it's focused more just on the message and so on. But, they got to know, you've got to understand what is called in German the Sitz im Leben, the life setting of the context of what was taking place, and so studying all these things together is what gives you that broader picture of what was happening at that time. So a lot of the establishment Jews, the hierarchy in Jerusalem and Israel were many of them were trying to fight for their struggle for power, to remain the hierarchy in the temple and so on. And then, of course, this guy comes along who says he's Mashiach and so on. And this was a threat to their dominance, obviously. So they were rejecting him. But meanwhile, there were a lot of people who were accepting him and were thinking that it was going to be an immediate redemption in a sense, possibly. So they were rising up and causing seditions and fighting against Jerusalem. And then, of course, you had the establishment fighting against those Sicarii and those rebels, and it was a mess, basically. It sounds like, anyway.
Okay, so I'm just kind of looking at my notes, making
Yeah,
sure
yeah. I was
I
just looking at.
because
I
we
was
kind of
just looking at.
stopped here because I was talking about how Isaiah 45:13 says he will build my cities, talking about Cyrus.
Right, King Cyrus. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, because there's a couple of futurists, right, that say they're gonna divide the 70 weeks of Daniel into 3 parts. And they're gonna say 538 BC to 489 BC is the first 49 years, and then somewhere starts the next 434 years, but there's nothing in the text that even tells you when the 439 is supposed to start. So I don't even see how they can break it up because they don't have a start. They don't have nothing to start it. Like, I mean, I'd be open to that ideal, but it's like, where is the starting of it? And the only ones they would keep counting backwards. And I'm like, well, you can't count backwards because it could quite possibly be more than that. You don't know because you don't have a start date. So we don't have a start date to confirm it actually fits in between your time periods. But I wanted to go over like how the word build, because I want to make sure I got this right. The verb in Isaiah 45:13 is that yivne. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah. It's a yod bait. Yeah. So it without the vowel points, it would be either yivne or yibne. Because the bait can sound like a B sound or a V sound, depending.
Oh, okay.
Now, ancient Hebrew didn't have the V sound. It was bait only. The V sound is more of a later development after, the later history. Like the Jews in Yemen, they speak like probably the more ancient Hebrew, and in their Hebrew, they don't use like a V sound. So like in Hebrew, hishtachave means to bow down and worship. But in the ancient Hebrew, it would say hishtachave. It would not be a V. It would be a W sound for the Vav. It's like, yeah.
Okay, so sometimes it can be a B or a W sound.
Well, if it's a Vav, this is what's weird, is the letter Vav can have an U sound, a V sound, or a W sound, whereas the bait, which would be equivalent to the letter B, would have a B or a V sound also. So it just depends on the context. And then in the ancient Hebrew, in the Chaldean writing, like the Hebrew that you see right there on the screen, is the Hebrew that developed after the Babylonian captivity, which was from the Chaldean letters. So before that, it was the ancient Hebrew letters. You see what I mean? So the Old Testament before 800 AD, BC, I'm sorry, around in that time, or maybe even a little later, would have been written in Paleo Hebrew, not in the Square Aramaic script that we see now. This is Square Aramaic script, actually. This Hebrew modern Hebrew is Square Aramaic script, but the writings that Moshe and them would have written would have been Paleo Hebrew, which would have been different. I mean, it would have all been pronounced the same, but it was different letters altogether. What's interesting, too, is they found some Hebrew manuscripts that when it came to the sacred name of the Almighty, all of it was written in Square Aramaic, but when it came to the sacred name, it was still written in Paleo Hebrew because they were afraid to change even the letters from the Paleo Hebrew to the Square Aramaic script because of the scripture that says you shall not take the name of God in vain. They were afraid to even change the letters at all because they felt that they might be blaspheming if they did. So some of the Hebrew manuscripts have square Aramaic, but when the name, the Yod Vav comes, they wrote it in Paleo Hebrew still, which is interesting too. But there's a lot of research on this stuff I've done for years, but it's like stuff that I don't think about all the time. So that's why I appreciate you. Because when I come on your show, it's like it all has to come. I have to remember all the stuff again.
Yeah.
So it's a blessing, man. I'm telling you. That's why I enjoy coming on your show.
Awesome, dude. Because it's like, yeah, I didn't know if I'm like I don't want to put you through too much.
No, no. It's man. I've always enjoyed. Listen, I've always enjoyed talking to you. I've always enjoyed being on your show. I've always enjoyed listening to you. I don't ever want you to think otherwise. And I think people, the problem with people is that they act like they can't have differences of opinion. Look, none of us are going to know. We all know in part. We prophesy in part. When he who is perfect comes, then we shall know as we are known. But in Revelation, it says, blessed is he who keeps the sayings of this book. It doesn't say, blessed is he who knows everything 100% right and all that. You know what I mean? But just the fact, I think that the Holy One sees us studying and toiling over his word and debating his word and trying to understand it is a blessing in and of itself. Because look at how many people in the world could not even care about the word of the Almighty. You know what I mean? They're just in the world lost. So I try not to have that attitude that, oh, this guy doesn't know, or that person doesn't know this. If any man thinks he knows anything, Paul said, we know nothing as we ought to know. If any man would be wise, let him be a fool that he should be wise. So humility and humbleness is really the biggest thing, being willing to listen. And you don't have to always agree, but then, of course, listen, I'm going to tell you something. I don't know if you've watched any of my recent shows and reports.
Because I mainly get notifications for YouTube and not so much for.
No, it's okay. But no, I'm just saying you'll be pleasantly surprised because, I've always been an ardent supporter, of Trump when he was in office and so on. Thought he had always done a good job. But more and more as I've studied, more and more as I've seen things, especially with this new administration, I've been doing some really good reports that I think you would appreciate.
All right, I'd be looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I'm always willing to also to tell people, look, a wise man receives instruction, and a wise man is always willing to say, hey, you know what? I'm like, take a second look at this. I don't serve any man. I serve the Holy One of Israel. That's who I worship, and him alone, and but I did have confidence in the first term of a lot of the things that Trump was doing. But as you see things, you go back and go, yeah, well, this wasn't right. Yeah, a lot of the things with the shots wasn't correct. I won't get into a lot of that because we're probably on YouTube. But
no. See, you got to remember, Trump supposedly fixed all that. So you just go ahead.
Okay.
And then these people can eat crow if I get kicked off because it's like, he didn't fix it.
That's good. I like that. But I have been doing a lot of shows telling people that we've been bamboozled, that the technocratic deep state has crept in instead to develop the AI, the massive surveillance, the mRNA technology to supposedly cure cancer and all these things, and the orb that is going to scan your eye and collect all your information. You got to watch the shows. I've been doing it since the election, because again, I'm also the type of person, I have no problem saying, hey, these were the reasons. My reasons for supporting were never ill-intentioned. I had no ill intentions to deceive anybody. I just believed at that time that for the most part, out of all of the gaggle of cabal that is in the world, that he, came forth doing some good stuff. But again, there were things that we have to understand is that there's not always going to be, there's always going to be deception along with truth. So the biggest thing is being willing and understanding to see it and then to say, oh man, I was wrong about that, and I'm the first one to have no problem with that and say, yeah, man, but I think too, in the scripture, there is a scripture that says that the people will deceive and be deceived. So what my point with that is, I think that that's a combination with Trump himself. I think that he has deceived himself, so therefore he is deceiving. So I think that sometimes you could be doing stuff that you think is correct. You think it is right. You think this is good for people or whatever, who knows? But my point is, more and more, I've tried to now pull away and focus more so on the bigger picture with people and say, look, it doesn't matter who's in the office. And I've said this a lot, but there were times that, yes, I did support him and say, hey, I think he's the best guy for the job, even to the second time. But as things started happening when he put JD Vance in, and I saw Peter Thiel, I said, wait a second, all these guys are a freaking bunch of globalists. And then Howard Lutnick, Elon Musk, I said, this is all World Economic Forum. These guys are global young leaders for the World Economic Forum. One of his advisors, I can't remember his name right now, but he's a Skull and Bones member. I mean, it's like, what the hell is going on here? There's cleaning one swamp creature set for another swamp creature set. And that's exactly what's happening. And so, unfortunately, it's just an ongoing effort to the beast system being developed.
One thing I want to ask you about is, okay, so there's, even back in 2020, this vandalism of Catholic churches started up in America.
Right.
I personally think it's a psyop.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of wondering what you think about that, because I think what it is they're going to wind up using that as an excuse to, hey, people are against the Catholic Church, now we got to go protect the Catholics.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a psyop. I've talked about that. I did some shows on YouTube a long time back with Obama when he was talking about certain things, but they all got erased, so I don't have them anymore. It's like 800 videos that they erased. But
yeah, you had some good ones.
Yeah, but yeah, I've always talked about that. But I do think the same thing. And my friend Ron and I were talking about that the other day, and I said, it's just like with people with Ronald Reagan, how they all, Ronald Reagan was the one that normalized relations with the Vatican, had a red phone to the Pope. And, as soon as he got shot at, he started putting Council on Foreign Relations members left and right in the White House. Well, you think about it. Trump came in, he got shot at. Now he's got all these, the gaggle of cabal in the White House. So either one, you got one of two things. Either Trump, you could look at Ronald Reagan maybe had good intentions in the beginning. And then when he got shot at, he's like, okay, what the hell with this? I'm just going to do what they want because I don't want to die. You could kind of possibly look at the scenario of Trump not being an angel of God and not being the devil incarnate either. Just a person who had his own agenda, a billionaire businessman coming into office, and maybe even having some idea that he could do some good. But as soon as you get in there, the swamp land, pulls you in and you're done. I don't think there's any redemption in there. And I think that whoever they put in there, they're going to do the will of the beast system, not anything else. You know what I mean? But there are some good things that happen, and then there's going to be some bad things. And that's what I was talking about in one of my recent shows. I said, the left went so crazy this time. It was just beyond the pale. And I think they did that purposely.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
They went with this extremism so hardcore that when people, even the left, would say, what the hell, they would move to the right. And they purposely did that too. And then also what it would do is give the layer of perception that, let's say when Trump and them come in, oh, look, we're going to shut down DEI. Oh, we're going to close the borders. I said, these are all spigot laws, people. They can open the borders at any time. They can shut them down at any time. Those laws, like Carol Quigley said, those are laws that they can manipulate, but there's certain things they're never going to stop. They're not going to stop the environmental climate change stuff. They're not going to stop the AI procession. They're not going to stop the digital currency progression. So they have to have that going in both terms. And this is how they've done it. They've moved it right in and called it MAGA. You know, Elon Musk and all them. Oh, look, we're MAGA. Oh, yeah, you know, we're all patriots now. It's nonsense. But they get in there, and now people, and then you got people like Alex Jones and all these so-called alternative news medias, but they're not fighting the New World Order. They're a part of it. I mean, they're all singing the tune of the New World Order, because 5 years ago everybody would have been against digital currencies, right? And the electric vehicles and 15-minute cities and stuff. But now Elon Musk comes out and, oh, look, Tesla, and I've got these small houses you can live in, and it's like, am I in the Bizarro world, or like what's going on here? The Twilight Zone. So, but I did say, and this is where I think people get a little confused, but I did predict the second time that Trump would get into office again this time. And I talked about it. Now, whether you want him to be in there or not, I just knew that he was going to get into.
I knew he was definitely going to be in there, because I was getting mad at you when you were upset that the election looked rigged the last time, and I was like, well, they're planning. Now, I thought they were gonna bring him right back at the time. I knew he was coming back one way or another. I thought he was going to come back that very next year, and like, you know, and they were just going to, and it was going to be the same feeling you got now, where you got this, everyone singing hallelujah and yay, right, America's back. I thought that. But then I was like, you know what? It made more, when I started watching it more unfold, I was like, you know what? It makes more sense. You let Biden take all the heat.
Right.
People are naturally going to say, no, Biden's the one responsible for the jab. And it's like, well, no, Trump passed everything. And Trump could have also put some legal protections in for people. Even if you really believe it, you could have. But he kind of like my friends felt betrayed that were on the child defense, the Child Defense League and stuff like that, whatever that advocacy group is that like speaks out against child vaccinations and mandating.
Oh yeah.
They were mad. They felt betrayed in 2017, 2018. I think it was 2018 when New York and some of these other states started removing vaccine exemptions, and they were asking Trump about it. And Trump was like, you know, this measles is really going around. If they tell you, you got to get the shot, you got to get the shot. Like, I knew some people that were actually like complaining to Trump personally about that. Right. And so that's when I was like, wow, man, he's really like messing these people over, like right to their face. And then it just so happens, you know, he's talking about, now I didn't know about this until later on, but you know, he was talking about a universal flu vaccine almost since the day he got in office that first time. So my whole thing is, you let Biden take all that heat about the mandates and all that, and feeling like it's, oh no, it's really the Democrat. And it's like, well, the Democrats really weren't pushing it. If you really look, they pushed it afterwards, you know, but because you can easily program them and brainwash them, but the ones higher up really weren't pushing. Like, Trump was the one that got the warp speed started, you know, and he could have put everything in there. So I had a feeling, like, once I started thinking about it more, I was like, oh, they're definitely bringing him back, because it's like, if they bring him back, it okays the mRNA platform. It's like, well, no one would be stupid enough to vote for him a second time if the mRNA wasn't safe. So
well, I think too, you know, and I agree 100% with everything you just said. I think also the biggest thing is that, you know, I try to look at things in a way that people are not always going to know everything. So like people like us, we study all the day. We study all day, all night. We eat, sleep, and live, you know, this and sit here and constantly go through these things. So they take the element of truth to push that. And so when all of this stuff happened, yes, of course, I mean, I didn't take the jab, and I, you know, I told people, like, you know, I didn't give medical advice to people. I just simply said, look, as for me and my house, we're not going to take it. You do what you need to do, but I would suggest that you research it. It definitely research before you make a decision, because I didn't want to give legal advice over there, you know. But But
No, that's
friends and stuff that
smart.
I knew, I told them, "Hey, don't do it, man. Don't do it. This is crazy." You know, it hasn't been, it's experimental and, and everything. And then later on, Obama and them come out and admit that it was, basically. There was that video where he was talking about it, where it was just like, oh yeah, it's experimental. You'd be testing it on all these people. Yeah, they were the test guinea pigs. But the point is, so I think that's what it is. They use this extremism on the one side. So then when the Trump administration would come back in, as soon as, it's funny because he got shot at, and then like a day later or 2 days later, JD Vance comes to his house with Peter Thiel. And Peter Thiel is the one who started Palantir, PayPal. He's the one that started Oracle. These are all these deep state, surveillance and AI grids that the World Economic Forum and them want to push, basically, because the CIA was trying to set up LifeLock. They shut it down, but then it came out as Palantir, basically. Palantir was a development of Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is behind all these people. Peter Thiel funded in the millions the Trump administration. He funded in millions JD Vance, and JD Vance was he worked for Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel. You got Sam Altman, who's pushing AI, open AI. You got Oracle, which is, I think, Ellison, who worked for the CIA, got out and then developed Oracle. So all of this deep state surveillance, New World Order surveillance system is being set up. And then you got, you got SpaceX and what you call it, Starlink and all of this. This is the satellite system for the New World Order. We're seeing the New World Order being set up, except they utilized the left-right paradigm almost perfectly, basically, if you look at it. You know what I mean? You got to give them credit. I mean, these people they're not chumps. They know exactly how to do it. And, of course, that's where we're leading right in. But what it did is it fooled people. I mean, the very day, it was funny because the very day that that Trump got elected, it was like the next day or two, the 3-4 days later, man, I just felt horrible. As I know, I just felt this deep darkness. And I called my friend Ron, and Ron was like, man, he's like, what's going on? I said, I don't know, man. I said, but how do you feel? And he goes, man, I don't know. I feel really, really like something deep and dark. I said, I know, me too. I said, I'm telling you. And so that's when I started researching all of these people in the cabinet, and you start looking them all up, and they're all tied to Silicon Valley, and they're all tied to what they call Technocracy. Technocracy Inc. Elon Musk's father was a technocrat, and so on and so forth. So anyway, but I just wanted to tell you that. So I've got some good videos and stuff that I've been doing on that and doing a lot of research lately. That's why I haven't been doing as many videos lately, because I've been doing just a lot of reading and studying instead. And, of course, my biblical studies and stuff, too.
Yeah, one thing, I don't know if this is accurate. I'm double checking with the AI again. But but yesterday when I was like researching what dispensationalists believe about Daniel 9:26. Okay, this is what I was absolutely looking for. Because I go, do most dispensationalists believe Daniel 9:26 is talking about an antichrist as part of a revived Roman Empire? It says, yes, in classic and much of contemporary dispensationalism, Daniel 9:26 through 27 is typically understood to be about a future end-time prince, the Antichrist, who emerges from a revived Roman Empire. The rationale is that the people of the prince who is to come in verse 26 are identified with the Roman forces who destroyed Jerusalem in 70 CE. Hence, the prince Antichrist is viewed as coming from the same overarching Roman sphere. What's interesting about this is that if you talk to a dispensationalist and you try to talk to them about, hey, I think the Vatican is running the world, what will they say? No, there's going to be like a revived Roman Empire and an there's going to be an Antichrist, and the Pope can't possibly be the Antichrist. Wait a minute, you in your dispensationalism, you are teaching that the Antichrist is going to emerge from a revived Roman Empire. and some of them say that Daniel 26 and 27 is a dual prophecy, so there's a dual fulfillment. Well, if the first fulfillment was the Roman Empire, what? And you're saying that the second fulfillment's a revived Roman Empire? Why can't you say that the Pope's the Antichrist? Like that, like drives me nuts. And dude, like I just thought about that yesterday when I was like researching dispensationalism. I was like, is this even like really like? Because to me, it's so in your face that you see the Pope meeting with the kings of the earth. You see it meeting with Fortune 500 companies. You see it at the Vatican Audience Hall, looks like a snake. You see the Pope, you see all the presidents and leaders of the world bowing to the Pope. You see like these like ecumenical conferences that aren't just Christian churches, but like voodoo priests, Hindus, Muslims, everyone in this one world prayer ecumenical conference, right?
Right.
And then you see him being part of these like one world religions where he's almost like viewed as like, it's almost like they're putting him up there like he's the president of all the religions of the world, right? You know, like the religious president of the world. And it's like when you start to see all this, and you start to see how Roman Catholics are just running both sides of our political party and everything. And it's like in our media, you flip on Fox News. Oh, I want to know about I need to know about politics. Oh, well, we got Sean Hannity, Bill O'Reilly, and
Right, all of them.
Ingram. It's like I just named 4 right off the top of my head. I can't name a Protestant off the top of my head.
Right.
And it's like, but yeah, a dispensationalist will be like, oh no, that's ridiculous.
Right.
Antichrist is going to be part of a revived Roman Empire. I'm like, well, wait a minute.
Well,
Vatican is in Rome, and Pope from Rome. Looks like an empire that's running the whole world, but they can't say it. They can't say it. They won't admit it.
The interesting thing is, I have a different take, even probably too, than a lot of people on the Antichrist, because, like I was explaining to somebody, I was talking to someone the other day, and I told him, I said, there is no Antichrist in Revelation. If you look up Revelation.
Well, that is kind of true.
There is a beast and a false prophet. Now, my point with that is not to say there isn't an Antichrist, but my point is First John, I think it's in First John, when he says, you have heard, right here, beware of Antichrists. But he says, little children, it is the last time, and as you have heard that Antichrist shall come, even now there are many Antichrists, whereby we know it's the last time. And he says, they went out from us, but they were not of us. Had they been of us, then they would no doubt have continued with us, but they went out that they might be made manifest. So my point is, I think the development of this idea of an Antichrist is much later too. Anyone who denies Yeshua as the Messiah is Antichrist. So there's many. And now what's interesting is, I was talking about the Pope. I believe the Pope is more fit for the false prophet, because the Pope is called the Holy See, which I thought was interesting, because if you go back in the book of Numbers, what were prophets called before they were called prophets? They were called seers. They were seers.
Oh, yeah. I remember
so
this point.
The Holy See would be the Holy Prophet. He calls himself the Holy Prophet. And so you've got this beast and a false prophet that stands in a holy place, and so the beast system, I think the beast itself is more of there were coins. You can look them up. Look up the Roman coin in the 1st century, Roma. There were these coins that say Roma, but there's a woman sitting on 7 hills on a beast on these coins from the 1st century. And of course, Revelation says there's a woman having 7, or the woman sits on a beast that has 7 heads and 10, 7 heads and 10, 7 mountains and 7 hills and something like that. 7 heads and 10 horns. Yeah, that's it. And later in Revelation 17, it says, I will tell you the mystery of this. The 7 heads are 7 mountains upon which the woman sits. Well, of course, Rome sits on 7 hills. And also it is the city that rules over the kings of the earth. So, I mean, it's pretty descriptive of Rome. So my point with that is, the only place where Antichrist is mentioned is 1 John. and it says at this time there's many antichrists. So I don't think I think that the false prophet would obviously be an antichrist because, he denies the Messiah. But this idea of the antichrist is more so. I understand the concept of it, but I don't believe that it's specifically there is an antichrist per se, that it's one antichrist only. There is one false prophet and there's a beast system in Revelation, but there's no mention of an antichrist in Revelation. So the antichrist is an idea of anyone who denies Yeshua as being the Messiah. They are an antichrist, and there's many of them in the world, is what John was saying at his time. Many antichrists, but again, I do understand the concept. So don't get me wrong. I don't nitpick over those things when I talk about it. I understand the concept of some type of ruler coming, but I more so, though, what I like about what you're saying is that's why I adhere to the beast and the false prophet, because then I can show, hey, look at this man who says he's the Holy See. He is he wears a mitre that's called Pontifex Maximus, and he writes Vicarius Filii Dei on his mitre that equals 666, and it means the image of the Son of God. Many things here, but also look up the word antichrist in the sense in the Latin. I think it doesn't mean necessarily always against. It means in place of, too, as something that's like in place of a Christ. So he puts himself in the place of Christ. Well, who did that? The Roman papacy, the Pontifex Maximus. Call no man on earth your father, but he's called the Pope, which is Papa in Latin, meaning father. You know what I mean? And all the priests are called fathers, but yet it was talked about in the New Testament as not being something you should do. It's interesting.
Yeah, Holy Father, the Pope was not called that until, was it the Council of Trent? It's whatever council was in 1600.
Was it that Council of Trent or something? Or
I think it was, if the Council of Trent was in 1600, it was that council that started, I think, calling him Holy Father.
Okay.
That's when he started being called Holy Father. Because I started looking at it, I was like, man, when did he start getting that title, the Pope getting that title of Holy Father? But I think Pope does mean father anyway.
It does. Pope is from the Latin papa.
Okay.
Father. Yeah.
So he's probably always called that then.
So that papacy, the Pope, I don't know when the actual term Pope started. I know Pontifex Maximus.
That would be a good one to look up, man. I need to look that up.
To when they actually started using the term Pope, I'm not sure. But I know they used Pontifex Maximus, and I know it said Vicarius Filii Dei on the mitre and Latin, which equaled 666. And Vicari Filii Dei means the vicar of the Son of God, or the very image of the Son of God. So he calls himself basically the Antichrist in place of Christ. If you translate that, as some of the translations I've understood of anti meaning against, or not against necessarily, but
or
in the place of. And substitute in the sense. So, so that's why when I thought it was interesting when they call it the office of the papacy too, the Holy See, but also they use it interchangeably and call him the Holy See sometimes too. I read some articles on it. I thought, man, that's what they used to call the seers.
If they call him the Holy See, that would be really
well. I've read some articles that they say they call the office of the Holy See, but it has been used interchangeably more and more. So, when you say the Holy See, you some people have that idea that are you talking about the office or are you talking about the Pope? But like I said, I thought it was interesting because it made me think of Numbers when it says in those days before the prophets, they were called seers. So because they would see. So the Holy See would be, in a sense, a holy prophet. And I thought about the false prophet of Revelation. So I thought that was interesting, that tie together,
Wow, that is interesting. Yeah, because I didn't. Yeah, I didn't even think about them possibly calling him a holy see.
Well, I read, I'd have to find the articles, but I had read an article on that where it said that it was from a Catholic article too, that, you know, that it has been used interchangeably at times. Um, Whether maybe improperly or not, I don't know. You know what I mean? But they admit that it has been used in that sense, that some people would refer to him more so as the Holy See, not just the papacy, you know. So either way, it's pretty interesting, you know.
At one point, I just want to go back to John, 1 John 2, where it says, "Children, it is the last hour, just as you have heard that the Antichrist is coming." So there is a singular Antichrist, plus there's also Antichrist.
Well, you gotta look it up, because some texts say you have heard that Antichrist will come, not wouldn't without the article the. So I don't know how the Greek
Oh,
does. So I'd have to look into the
okay.
Greek to see. I don't know if there's a definite article or if it's just you have heard that Antichrist will come. Even now, there are many Antichrists. So I'm not sure. I mean, it could be the Antichrist, but I think there's a lot of texts that say you have heard that Antichrist will come. And then he talks about this is the spirit of Antichrist or whatever that denies the the Father and the Son.
So I see. I'd have to do a whole bunch of AI cross
Right.
referencing for me
Yeah.
to
No, it's
make
just something to think
sure.
about.
Because it's like so far, it would look like it's saying that, like basically little children, last hour it is, and as you have heard that Antichrist is coming, even now Antichrist many have arisen. So to me, it still sounds like there's that Antichrist, and then there's now, but it is coming. So you heard it's come. Even now, Antichrist many have arisen. So I still wonder if there's still like
Yeah, I agree
the
with you. All I was making a statement of with a lot of people that is that if it was such that if that's the case, it's ironic that it's not mentioned at all in Revelation, in the book of Revelation.
right.
The term Antichrist. I just found that kind of interesting, that like why isn't that term Antichrist mentioned in the whole book of Revelation, but there's a beast and a false prophet. Now you might attribute the false prophet as being Antichrist too, that's my point. But it's just interesting that it's not mentioned, you know what I mean, for such a statement. And the only place Antichrist is mentioned is in these verses right here. So to get a whole doctrine out of it, you know what I mean, that's my point.
Oh, and one more
It's
thing, like
interesting.
some people could um interpret the false prophet as being the papacy itself, like the entire papacy, not just one man, but because the papacy is called the Holy See, you could possibly, I'm not saying this is what you should do or not do. I'm just putting out this as a possibility because you brought up how the papacy is also called the Holy See, that you could also say the entire Holy See is also the false prophet, possibly.
And so, yeah, so I mean, and that's my point, like with my friend Ron, for example, too. He has some differences of opinion on how they sees certain interpretations of it, but I told him basically we we both come down, just like you and I, we basically come back to the same sense of, at least we understand the same entities and things are involved, you know what I mean, especially with the papacy and the revived Roman Empire and so on. But so again, that's why I don't, you know, it's one thing to study with people, and I don't think that because someone doesn't believe exactly as me, that in any way they're a heretic of sort, but more so there are going to be some differences, just like there were probably differences in the time of the first century with the Jewish people and the believers at the time. They debated things, because you're trying to figure these things out. You're trying to understand them. So I think that's what people have to understand is you don't have, I mean, there are some things that, yes, you may have to reject if it goes into the way of blasphemy or idolatry or something, yes. But as far as if you're looking at the book of Revelation and you're trying to understand the events of it, not everyone's going to have that same view, obviously, but I don't reject that person outright just because of that, is what I'm saying. You know what I mean? And the only way that they may understand is if you have patience with them and you continue to show them what you believe about it. Maybe at one point they go, wow, you know what? I'm glad that you kept telling me that, because I finally went back and for one day a light bulb came on and it made sense to me, but it never made sense for 5 years, So I think that it's good to have shows like this where you can debate different things, bring people on, and appreciate the fact that they'll come on and debate with you, and people can see it, because what it does is it also then entices other people to, well, I mean, I'm going to study too, and I'm going to see what's going on for myself. I think that's an encouraging thing, because the Bible says, study to show yourself approved unto the Holy One, a workman that doesn't need to be ashamed, rightly. They say dividing the word of truth. I use the term discerning the word of truth, which is basically the same understanding. You've got to iron sharpens iron. You got to get with others and debate and discuss. I think that's what makes everybody sharper. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, that's something to think about too. The article, whether it uses a definite article there or not, and is it saying specifically, but definitely, I mean, throughout history, we've seen many examples of Antichrist, through different rulers on the earth and things too, and the things that they did.
I'm asking the Chat GPT, when did the Roman bishop first receive the title Pope?
Yeah, that would be interesting, because I don't know right off. I don't know.
Probably shouldn't burn my 4.5 credits, because you only get like so many searches for like the higher grade search engines.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, or else I'd always use 1.0, because I think that's like the highest grade, because I actually pay for these services.
Oh,
and
it's funny because I've never used AI. I don't even know how to. I don't know. I'm the old school, I guess. I just continue.
I was so much against it at first, and but I was like, wow, it's really good at researching. And dude,
Yeah,
the original Bing was amazing. Like, because see, what they started doing was they started handicapping it and stopping it from doing certain features. But when Bing first came out, Bing AI, I go, hey, can you look this up? And it would search every book in the entire world. It wouldn't say, oh, I can't look this up, I can't read this. See, now like this one, it'd be like, well, I can't read this person's work. I'm like, are you kidding me? But Bing, dude, it didn't care, dude. Like, if it was like a paper, like a research paper that was buried on someone's website that you had to go behind a wall to get to, it would go get that for you, and it would find it. That's why you remember that one time when I had you read that piece of Daniel for me, and like, where did you get this from? Well, okay, so that AI went and found and got that for me. Yeah, and I guess, and then it's like, as soon as they did that, they started like tightening up all the security, and you couldn't get that anymore from that website.
Wow.
So it's like it was like so I was trying to, like, my heart is like, dude, I'm gonna research as much as possible, and dude, I got all this stuff, dude, from the Ukraine, like, that people don't know about, and all this stuff going on with the Vatican, the Ukraine, and the Orthodox Church, because I think some of that going on in Ukraine is actually tied back to the Vatican wanting doing some power plays with the Orthodox Church. Like, some of that's tied in together. But anyway, it says the title here, I'll just have the AI read it, say my voice, and it probably will sound better. So let's.
The title Pope, Latin Papa, meaning father, was initially applied broadly in the early church, often given respectfully to various bishops. Not only the Bishop of Rome. However, the specific identification of the Bishop of Rome as Pope, meaning a unique authoritative title associated exclusively with the Roman bishop, developed gradually. Historical development. 1st to 3rd century, the term Papa was originally a respectful title used broadly. In fact, it was commonly used for bishops or senior church leaders in general, especially in the East, not exclusively for Rome. For example, the Bishop of Alexandria was also commonly called Pope. Papa, a usage that continues even today in the Coptic Orthodox Church. 4th century, 300s AD, by the late 4th century, Roman bishops began to assert greater authority over other bishops in the Western Church, gradually associating the title Pope more closely with Rome. Still, other bishops continued to use the title as well. Contrast 5th century, 400s AD. Pope Leo I, Leo the Great, 440 to 461, significantly strengthened the authority and prestige of the Bishop of Rome, helping to solidify Rome's primacy claim among Western bishops. He's often cited as the first Bishop of Rome to significantly embody the authority associated later with the title Pope. Nachast 6th century, 500s AD, the title increasingly became associated specifically with the Bishop of Rome. The authority of Gregory the Great, 590 to 604, especially solidified this association in the West. Late Antiquity and early medieval period, 6th to 11th centuries. By the late 6th century, and especially into the 7th and 8th centuries, the title Pope had become effectively exclusive in Western Europe to the Bishop of Rome. By the 11th century, especially with Gregory VII, 1073 to 1085, the title was unquestionably reserved exclusively for the Roman bishop in the Latin Church. Summary of timeline. Before 400 AD, Papa equals general respectful title for bishops, including Alexandria, Rome, etc. Late 4th, early 5th centuries, growing association of Pope with Roman bishop. Leo the Great, 440 to 461, first major Roman bishop whose authority reflected papal status. Gregory the Great, 590 to 604, strengthened and clarified the role of Roman bishop as unique leader, Pope. By 7th, 8th centuries, in the West, Pope became essentially synonymous with the Roman bishop. By 11th century, Gregory VII formalized exclusivity in the Latin Church, making the Roman bishop universally recognized as Pope. Conclusion. While the Roman bishop wasn't called Pope exclusively from the very beginning, the term evolved from a general respectful title to the unique designation for the Roman bishop.
So basically, they say you know what's really mind blowing to me about that though is why does it say that Pope Gregory, not Pope Gregory, but Gregory the Great strengthened and clarified the role of the Roman bishop as unique leader Pope? Because Gregory is the one who said the first bishop to accept the universal title. The first bishop to accept the title of universal bishop will become the precursor to the Antichrist, or is the precursor to the Antichrist. So, I mean, it's just kind of weird that the AI is saying that he strengthened and clarified the role of the Roman bishop as unique leader. So I'm just questioning, like, what does the AI mean by that? Because that was my understanding of Gregory.
Yeah, I don't know. That's pretty interesting. So they're showing like primarily between the 400 800 AD is when it really got kind of built up as that. So and then by the 11th century, it was set in stone basically. So
what was it? Just exclusively the Latin Church?
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, now me personally, I always thought Pope Boniface III was the first actual guy that was claiming the title of universal bishop, which was in 606 AD. Because he was the first guy that accepted it right after Gregory said all this, and then he goes and accepts that title.
Yeah.
So, but whether if Gregory strengthened and clarified the role, this guy Pope Boniface just grabbed it right on up. So, but it is kind of, but in the 8th century, so the Pope became essentially synonymous with the Roman bishop. Like if you said the word Pope, no one thought of anyone else but the Roman bishop, which is interesting too, because in 800 AD, that's when the Pope crowned Charlemagne, Emperor Charlemagne, on December 25th. So it's just kind of weird that that's also when Pope became synonymous with the Roman bishop at the same time when he thinks he's got the power to make kings. So,
right. Yep, interesting.
dude, I'm probably gonna close the show. Do you got anything?
No, I was going to say the same thing since
Anything,
my
man.
wife just got off of work, and I'm going to go up and see her. But no, I appreciate seeing you once again and being on the show. Just the biggest thing is just for people out there to study to show themselves approved, and and don't have a gullible mind, but have an open mind, and be willing to slow to speak, slow to anger. Swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. Be willing to debate with people and talk with them, but do it in kindness and love, out of trying to get something out of it, not trying to prove yourself right about something. I mean, we can all be wrong about stuff. It doesn't make you a bad person. I mean, hey, that's how we learn. So a person who's always thinks that they're correct will never learn anything, so sometimes you got to be wrong in order to know what is right, and that's okay. That's all right, So I appreciate it. Yeah. Sic Semper Tyrannis News. And I have Hard Hitting Truth on Facebook. So if you go to Facebook, look up Hard Hitting Truth, like a lot of my videos are there. So,
all right. Awesome, man. Hey, dude, I am so glad you helped me out with that Hebrew too, because I'm glad I got that straightened out, because I definitely don't want to include that as an argument. But dude, the thing that, dude, it's horrible, dude, because I've probably spent weeks studying that, thinking that was a solid argument, and I'm like, oh my gosh, because the thing is, the AI is also looking at the percentages of when is used, and even these interlinears, even when it's not just the AI either, it's even the interlinears themselves. Like if these people who write them say it's almost exclusively referencing to a covenant people or an ethnic group. So I'm thinking that it's got to be used in that way. And then okay, so you're thinking the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, is written towards God and his people. So he's going to almost always reference, since it's mostly about the Jews themselves, he's almost going to always say anyway, because he's almost always talking about the Jews, his people, this, and the whole book is about the Jews. So when you have those percentages and it says, well, the biggest percentage of time, it's always this. And so it's kind of got me thinking, man, that it's okay, I'm going to lay off that argument. I'm going to probably remove that from my book. So I appreciate that, man. And I probably need to apologize to someone too. So
now that only, or you could utilize that into your book to just show that, that this could be construed this way, but instead this is generally used this way. So you could still use it, but you could, because maybe there's other people that might feel that same way. So instead of totally throwing out the baby with the bathwater, you could kind of, take that look at it and say, in terms of this. But yeah, either way, yeah, it'd be interesting. I know I need to write a book sometime too. I've been thinking about it, but I don't know, what I'm going to write about.
I got a massive amount of info, because see, when I'm at work, I can't look at all this technical stuff, but I can talk to the AI and do little quick studies and have a thought in my mind and go, oh man, this I'm wondering about this. Does this connect to this? And I'll ask the AI, and later on I'll read it all and stuff, but I'll just, and so But one thing, dude, I have is like this book about the Vatican that I'm developing, about it controlling the whole world. And I uncovered some stuff about Viet Din, who wrote the Patriot Act and all this other stuff, and all like the connections and just how widely he's connected. And just like that alone, when you like just going into him alone would blow people's mind about the amount of control the Vatican has, like just him alone. And I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal, but when I started going into it, I like, yeah, if we had more time, I'd go into it. Maybe like the next show I'd go into, because I think you'd be pretty interested in this information.
Yeah, that would be, and that would be actually a good book too, you know, to go through that, you know, that would be some good stuff. Yeah. So yeah, definitely. Maybe I'll catch you on another weekend when you're doing a show and we could talk some about it.
All right, man. Sounds good.
All right.
All right, Mark. Thanks for coming by, man. Thanks for helping me out.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening.